Chapter 67. Begging for monthly votes at the beginning of the month. Today's update is over 10,000 words. Give me those who have guaranteed monthly votes. Dongqing Wudi was in a hurry. This was something that everyone could feel. Li Tianlan was almost dragged out of the villa and out of the courtyard by him. Thunder God led the way, walking as fast as he could. The three of them quickly walked to an open space in the central area of the villa, and Li Tianlan was directly stuffed into the helicopter by Dongqing Wudi. The helicopter rotors roared up after a while and flew higher and higher. Li Tianlan, who had taken a helicopter for the second time in his life, was confused. He looked at Dongqing Wudi sitting opposite him and looked at him seriously, and then at Thunder God who was driving the helicopter. He was full of questions, but he didn't know where to start. Uncle Thunder. Li Tianlan was silent for a while. He didn't know what to say to the military marshal in front of him, so he could only turn his head and call Thunder God. Thunder God's rumbling laughter rolled through the cabin, and it was clear and deafening in the roar of the rotors. Don't worry, boy. I don't have time to catch up with you. Just stay here. Marshal and I won't hurt you. Why? Don't you trust us? Li Tianlan smiled and said no more. For him, most people in the world could not be completely trusted, including Dongqing Wudi in front of him. But Thunder God was an exception. When he was 17 years old, when he walked out of the camp on the border for the first time, it was not his grandfather or any veteran in the camp, but Thunder God. Like today, he sat in the cabin and Thunder God drove the helicopter. It was dark outside the window. That year, from the southwest to the northwest, from the jungle to the desert, Li Tianlan slipped from the peak state. From beginning to end, Thunder God was by his side. The other party knew most of his secrets. If he had wanted to harm him, he would have had countless opportunities to do so every single day during that 1 year. In the past, he could give his life to Thunder God countless times. Today, facing Thunder God, what couldn't he trust? Li Tianlan's heart was steady, and his eyes were calm. Tianlan, you and Boss Qin, Dongqing Wudi, who was sitting opposite Li Tianlan, hesitated and finally said, how did you and Boss Qin meet? Li Tianlan was stunned and whispered, when I came to Huading, she was the first person I saw. Elderly arranged it. Dongqing Wudi's clean face did not change, but his eyes were tangled, and he seemed to be a little depressed. Li Tianlan nodded. He was not surprised that Dongqing Wudi knew his identity. Thunder God was Dongqing Wudi's bodyguard, so the marshal naturally knew what he knew. Dongqing Wudi took out a cigarette, took a deep drag, shook his head, and said subconsciously, how did you and her? Li Tianlan seemed to hear something wrong in his tone. His eyes narrowed and his expression became more and more indifferent. Seeming to realize that his tone was not right, Dongqing Wudi smiled bitterly, looked at Li Tianlan and said, Tianlan, come and sit next to me. That's good. I'm airsick and don't dare to move around. Li Tianlan said with a smile and sat still. He was not disgusted with this legendary marshal of Zhongzhou state. Dongqing Wudi had a mixed reputation in the dark world. Some people thought that his approach was hot-blooded and heroic, while others thought that his approach was insane. But Li Tianlan thought that Dongqing Wudi's every move did not have too deep meaning. He was just bloodthirsty. Such a person was a homicidal maniac in small fights, and when he killed a lot, he would become a killing god. Dongqing Wudi was definitely not a good person, but he was extremely good to his own people. Ning Qiancheng could make him give up the meeting of the decision-making committee and come to Huading with a phone call, which could prove this. The fact that the Border Guard Corps was dead set on following him and advancing and retreating together with him also proved this point. He was not a good person, but he was a real general, a real commander. He was strong, iron-blooded, and domineering. For nearly 2 decades in Zhongzhou state, Dongqing Wudi alone propped up the backbone of the border of Zhongzhou state. Such a person, no matter what his international reputation was, at least in the eyes of the people of Zhongzhou state, he was a well-deserved hero. Li Tianlan couldn't feel bad for such a person, but now Dongqing Wudi looked at him in such a strange way. When he heard that Dongqing Wudi asked him to sit down, he subconsciously resisted. Dongqing Wudi stared at Li Tianlan for a while, and his eyes seemed to be a little sad. He nodded, looked away, and said softly, "Your father and I are very good friends." There was a trace of indescribable bitterness in his tone. "He saved my life and also saved the old master. If it weren't for your father, I don't know what the Dongqing clan would be like now." Although few people know about this, the people of the Dongqing clan will not forget and dare not forget. The Dongqing clan is willing to repay this kindness at any cost. "Tianlan, can you understand?" Li Tianlan's mouth twitched. He instinctively felt that there was something wrong with Dongqing Wudi's words, but he didn't know how to say it. He looked up at Dongqing Wudi seriously, and said calmly and sincerely, "From my standpoint, it's not a question of whether I can understand or not. We should thank the marshal and the Dongqing clan for their righteousness." "Your standpoint." "Hey, your standpoint." Dongqing Wudi laughed at himself and seemed to lose all interest in talking for a moment. He shook his head wearily and said softly, "The reason why I took you to Zhongzhou in such a hurry is that the old master wants to see you. The old master used a favor from many years ago to invite an extraordinary person back, hoping that he can show you the way. Tianlan, seize the opportunity." Li Tianlan's heart trembled for no reason. Looking at Dongqing Wudi, who had closed his eyes to rest, he nodded silently and stopped talking. The helicopter shuttled in the air. It was dark outside the window, and only the sound of the wind whistled in the rotation of the rotors. Overnight, he tested the attitude of the academics and inadvertently walked into the Dongqing clan, the leading force of the giant group. The road ahead was dark. What would happen tomorrow? Li Tianlan closed his eyes. In his mind, there seemed to be footsteps from a distant place, echoing in the depths of his heart. It was very light and very fast. That was the footsteps of destiny. Zhongyuan Province. Luojing. It was nearly 4:00 in the morning when the helicopter landed. Li Tianlan, who closed his eyes to rest but didn't fall asleep, followed Dongqing Wudi out of the helicopter and found himself at the foot of the mountain again. In front of him was a neatly paved two-way lane, stretching all the way up from the foot of the mountain to an unknown place. The straight poplars on both sides stood by the roadside, making the road deep and mysterious. In front of the helicopter, a row of cars was parked quietly. Four dark Mercedes-Benzes surrounded a solemn car whose name Li Tianlan couldn't name. The headlights softly illuminated the road ahead. Around each Mercedes-Benz stood four burly men, all in black suits. They stood beside the light and shadow of the headlights and stood silently with their hands on their abdomens, but they had a steady momentum as dignified as a mountain. These were all elites, and perhaps none of them was lower than the ice-condensing realm. Li Tianlan observed silently and followed Dongqing Wudi to the amazing motorcade ahead. In front of the luxury car whose name Li Tianlan couldn't name, an old man standing in front of the car saw Dongqing Wudi coming over and immediately came over with a smile. He ignored Dongqing Wudi, just looked at Li Tianlan, and said with a soft smile, "Are you young Master Li?" The old man was slightly fat, with slick back hair, and neatly combed hair. He was dressed in a tang suit and cloth shoes. He was clean, and his eyes were kind. It was easy to make a good impression. "I'm Li Tianlan." "I'm not young Master Li." Li Tianlan smiled and said, "What's your name, old man?" "Tianlan, this is Uncle An, one of the old master's bodyguards in those days. Now he is the steward of the family." Dongqing Wudi took the initiative to introduce him in a calm tone. The light in front of him shone on his face, and no one could see his expression clearly. "Hello, Senior An." Li Tianlan reached out and shook hands with the old steward politely. Because of the mysterious and forbidden Dongqing Huangtu, Li Tianlan was very interested in the Dongqing clan, and he also learned some superficial information from Ning Qiancheng. Before Dongqing Wudi served as the commander of the Border Control Corps, it had always been Dongqing Hongguang, the old master of the Dongqing clan, who supported the family. The old master was also one of the marshals of Zhongzhou state and also entered the decision-making committee. In terms of status, he was one level higher than the current Dongqing Wudi. At his peak, he was the nominal second-in-command of the Zhongzhou state military, but in fact, he was the first in charge of the daily work of the military. In the military, his ranking was second only to the president of Zhongzhou state, and he was a real giant and a big shot. Dongqing Hongguang's bodyguard in those days could absolutely be said to be a real expert. Don't stand on ceremony, young Master Li, welcome to the Dongqing clan. Senior An said with a smile, looking very kind. Young Master Li, the old master and the master are waiting for you. Please get in the car. Uncle An, Dongqing Wudi suddenly said, give me a car. I still have something to do, so I won't go to the old master's place. I'll go and have breakfast with him later. Senior An agreed with a smile and gave Dongqing Wudi a Mercedes-Benz. Dongqing Wudi took a deep look at Li Tianlan, strode into the Mercedes-Benz with Thunder God, and drove away. Li Tianlan calmly watched the Mercedes-Benz go away. Under the guidance of Senior An, he got into the luxury car of an unknown brand. Senior An drove the motorcade all the way up the mountain. The road wound all the way up, deep and calm. Occupying a mountain to be king. Such a word suddenly came to Li Tianlan's mind, and then he smiled bitterly. According to Ning Qiancheng, the whole Zhongyuan province was the territory of the Dongqing clan, which was the real top wealthy family in Zhongzhou state. Now the Dongqing clan just divided a mountain as their headquarters. How could it be called occupying a mountain to be king? The motorcade gradually sped up. The noise behind them faded away. Lights finally appeared in front of them. A super-large modern villa appeared in Li Tianlan's sight. The villa was 4 stories high and extremely wide. On the quiet top of the mountain, lights surrounded it. The entire villa became more and more dazzling and magnificent. In front of the villa was a large courtyard that had been transformed. It was neatly and reasonably planned, with gardens, rockery, pools, and jungles. The scenery was quiet, and the fragrance of flowers was overflowing. The night wind blew, wrinkling the pool, ruffling the flower beds, and ruffling the jungles. In a trance, Li Tianlan even felt that he had come to another world. He had been to the garden party, and the scenery in the garden party was also very beautiful, but that was a club. Here, however, was a private house. At this moment, Li Tianlan looked at everything in front of him and felt nothing but shock. Let's go. The old master is inside. Don't be nervous, young Master Li, Senior An took Li Tianlan out of the car and led the way to the villa. Li Tianlan took a deep breath. He was not nervous, but he felt a little uncomfortable standing in front of the top wealthy family in Zhongzhou state for the first time. In the courtyard, several patrols in black suits were carefully observing the surrounding environment. When they saw Senior An, they all bowed respectfully. Senior An looked indifferent. He took Li Tianlan all the way forward, pushed open the door of the villa, and went straight in. The decoration inside the villa was equally magnificent. But Li Tianlan's eyes were focused on the 2 people sitting in the small reception room. A gray-haired old man. A kind-looking old monk in a kasaya. The old man was about 70 or 80 years old. He was thin, and although he had white hair, he was extremely energetic. His eyes were even more majestic, and he had a kind of strong aura without anger. He was murderous and had the same origin as Dongqing Wudi. Li Tianlan confirmed the old man's identity at once. He was Dongqing Hongguang, the old master of the Dongqing clan. Although the old man did not have the title of god of massacre, he was also decisive, cold-blooded, and cruel when he was young. The Dongqing clan had been like this since the beginning. Every generation was bloodthirsty, and Dongqing Wudi's generation could be said to have reached the peak. As for the monk beside the old man, Li Tianlan did not know him. Master, young Master Li is here. Senior An pushed the door open and said with a smile, looking at the white-haired old man in the living room. The old man had already noticed Li Tianlan behind Senior An. His eyes were astonishingly bright, and he laughed and said, Tianlan, come here, let me have a good look. Li Tianlan walked over and opened his mouth, but did not know what to say. He could only bow slightly and said with a smile, Hello, old master. What old master? Dongqing Hongguang stared at him and said, call me grandpa. I've been friends with your grandpa for many years. It's not too much to ask you to call me grandpa, is it? Li Tianlan was a little embarrassed. He subconsciously touched his nose and opened his mouth, but he could not say anything. Dongqing Hongguang did not embarrass him. His bright eyes became softer and softer, and he suddenly said, how is brotherly? In the blink of an eye, you've grown up so much. I haven't seen my brother for a long time. Grandpa is fine. Li Tianlan nodded. If he had something to say, he would never say much. In front of such a sophisticated big shot, the more he said, the more mistakes he would make. Dongqing Hongguang nodded and said with a smile, come on, let me introduce you. This is Great Master Wu Wei. You may not have heard of this name, but you must have heard of the Great Soaring Temple, right? Great Master Wu Wei is the living Buddha with the highest seniority in the Great Soaring Temple. Even the current abbot of the Great Soaring Temple has to call him martial uncle. The Great Soaring Temple. Li Tianlan had naturally heard of this name. It was a martial arts force with a reputation only slightly worse than that of Mount Shu and Jade Pool. It practiced both Buddhism and Taoism, and its Buddhist incantation of 9 words was even more powerful. There were monks and Taoist priests in the Great Soaring Temple. Although it was a temple, the current abbot of the temple was a Taoist priest. His Taoist name was Tathagata, and he was one of the top 10 contemporary experts in Zhongzhou State. Taoist Tathagata's martial uncle. This was a real expert. Li Tianlan bowed slightly and said softly, greetings, Great Master. Amit Ba. Great Master Wu Wei smiled and put his palms together to return the salute. Looking at Li Tianlan, he suddenly laughed and said, benefactor, do you believe in destiny? Do you believe in karma? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and suddenly thought of Xian Xuanzi. The opening remarks of these two people were basically the same. I believe it or not. Li Tianlan chose his words carefully and said seriously, Great Master, can you see my karma? My karma? Great Master Wu Wei hesitated and put his palms together without saying a word. He seemed to be in a dilemma. Great Master, just say it. Li Tianlan said directly. Dongqing Wudi had already said on the plane that the Dongqing clan invited an eccentric person today to show him the way. Naturally, he would not stand on ceremony. If he really met a master in metaphysics, it would be of immeasurable help to him in the future. I see the karma of the donor. Great Master Wu Wei raised his head, took a serious look at Li Tianlan, and then lowered his head. Great Master. Dongqing Hongguang frowned slightly and couldn't help calling out. Great Master Wu Wei hesitated again, lowered his eyelids, put his palms together, and said, this donor has gone against the general trend and forcibly defied the natural order. I'm afraid he will die young and miserably in 10 years at most. 10 years at most, miserably. Dongqing Hongguang's expression changed dramatically, but he was not angry. There was only worry in his eyes. Xian Xuanzi of Taoism sect and Wu Wei of Buddhism sect could be said to be the real grandmasters of metaphysics in Zhongzhou State. The former was at least utilitarian, so it was easier to invite him. But the latter was a real free spirit. If it weren't for the fact that Great Master Wu Wei owed the Dongqing clan a karma many years ago, he would not have been invited today. But now he was invited, and the other party said that Tianlan would die miserably. What the hell was this? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly, but his expression did not change at all. He just said calmly, Great Master, do you have a solution? Everything depends on God's will. Great Master Wu Wei chanted the name of Buddha and said meaningfully, originally, the donor's fate was unsolvable and destined to be miserable. But about 20 years ago, the donor's fate was changed. I'm not sure what will happen in the future. Li Tianlan nodded expressionlessly, stood up, and said, I'll go to the bathroom. He got up and walked out of the small reception room. Signorin, who was standing in the living room, immediately came out and said with a smile, What's the matter, young Master Li? Li Tianlan nodded seriously. Although I know it's impolite to say this, if possible, I still hope that the Dongqing clan will throw the old monk out. Why? Senior An's face froze. Charlatan, pretending to be mysterious. Li Tianlan shook his head and said disdainfully. His fate was changed more than 20 years ago. F***CKU, I'm not 20 this year. Fuck you. Sorry, the update is late. Today's 2 chapters are over 10,000 words. Please understand. Chapter 68. Great Master Wu Wei. A charlatan. Still pretending to be mysterious. Senior An was directly stunned. What was all this? Great Master Wu Wei, the highest elder of the Great Soaring Temple, became famous even earlier than Xian Xuanzi, the eccentric of Haotian Taoism. In the past 20 years, Xian Xuanzi had risen to fame and was gradually becoming the first man in metaphysics. But no matter how famous Xian Xuanzi was, some top seniors would never forget Great Master Wu Wei of the Great Soaring Temple. They could be said to be the only 2 metaphysical grandmasters in the world. Xian Xuanzi intentionally or unintentionally dealt with the top wealthy families of Zhongzhou State and the Hidden Dragon Sea. As long as the people who invited him were important enough, he would not be refused. At least, he could give a few words of beneficial advice. Great Master Wu Wei, on the other hand, was truly free and unfettered in the world. He was a mysterious figure. Buddhism focused on predestination and karma. In recent decades, Great Master Wu Wei was not moved by power or money. He almost walked all over Zhongzhou State. He was like a living Buddha. He was willing to talk about karma to ordinary people and to point out the right path for some promising young people. There was a saying in the top circle of Zhongzhou State. As long as it was predestined, the living Buddha would answer all requests. Great Master Wu Wei had been famous for decades. Not to mention earlier, in the past 20 years, there were 4 people who were known to have received his guidance. 18 years ago, he advised Situ Tsangyue to go north alone. The hidden god of Zhongzhou State appeared in Mount Taibai. 15 years ago, he advised Hua Qingfeng, an expert, to enter Yuzhou. Azura path split, the shadow sect rose in the capital, and Hua Qingfeng took charge of the security department of Zhongzhou State. Now, more than 80% of the guards around the big shots in the Hidden Dragon Sea came from the shadow sect. 10 years ago, Lu Shuanghua, a senior intelligence officer of the Prince Group, was hunted down because he was framed. He fled to Jiangnan and met Great Master Wu Wei by chance. He was advised to take root in Jiangnan province. Lu Shuanghua lived in seclusion in Mount Lu. 8 years ago, he joined the Wang family of Beihai in a high-profile manner and established the largest civilian intelligence organization in southern Zhongzhou State, Jiangnan Society. 3 years ago, the Shadow Sting Force, the largest and most mysterious special forces in Zhongzhou State, was established. Wang Zhaoyang, one of the core members of the Wang family of Beihai and the commander of the Shadow Sting Force, went straight to the Great Soaring Temple on the second day he took office, just to thank Great Master Wu Wei in person. 20 years, 4 people, 4 giants of the dark world of Zhongzhou State. Whether Great Master Wu Wei intended it or not, no one dared to say that Xian Xuanzi had surpassed Great Master Wu Wei in metaphysics based on the achievements of these 4. The words of these 2 were basically equivalent to prophecies. This was something that many people acknowledged. Over the years, Senior An had heard many legends about Great Master Wu Wei and seen many people's worship and admiration for the living Buddha. He had never thought that one day a young man would disdainfully say that the living Buddha was a charlatan. Was there something wrong with this kid's brain? Or did he drink too much tonight? Elder An's heart trembled. He didn't know what to do. This brat was too ruthless. He was definitely doing this on purpose. Among the people present, except for Li Tianlan, no one was lower than the thunder-shocking realm. No matter how low Li Tianlan's voice was, it could not escape the ears of Great Master Wu Wei and Dongqing Hangguang. He said it to Eldarin, but it was no different from pointing at Great Master Wu Wei and cursing. Tianlan, don't talk nonsense. The corner of Dongqing Hangguang's mouth twitched. He looked at Great Master Wu Wei apologetically and said softly, "Great Master, Tianlan just came from a small place and hasn't seen much of the world, so, if I didn't know where he came from, how could I say that he went against the general trend?" Great Master Wu Wei turned the Buddha beads in his hand and smiled kindly. Li Tianlan hesitated a little, turned around again, and walked back to the small reception room. He sat down opposite Great Master Wu Wei and said calmly, "Great Master, I'm sincerely convinced that I went against the general trend. But about the birth destiny, I can only think that you're talking nonsense." Dongqing Hongguang glared at Li Tianlan and hesitated to speak. Great Master Wu Wei was indeed an eminent monk. He was good-tempered to a certain extent. He said with a smile, "Why? I'm less than 20 years old this year. Great Master said that my birth destiny was changed more than 20 years ago. More than 20 years ago, I wasn't born yet. How could I have a birth destiny?" Li Tianlan said calmly. When it came to fate, people would always think of some false theories, but there were still experts who could really grasp a trace of the trajectory. At the beginning, Li Tianlan really thought that Great Master Wu Wei was a charlatan. But when he thought of Elder N's eyes and Dongqing Hongguang's performance just now, he was a little confused. A top wealthy family like the Dongqing clan couldn't be fooled by any charlatan. But the so-called birth destiny had too many loopholes. "Benefactor, do you believe in destiny?" Great Master Wu Wei asked again the question that Xian Xuanzi had asked and he had just asked. Li Tianlan frowned slightly. In the villa of the Dongqing clan, his mood seemed to relax a little unconsciously, and his mood swings became more and more obvious. "You don't actually believe it?" Great Master Wu Wei chuckled and looked at Li Tianlan. "You don't believe in destiny, so you don't believe that someone has changed your birth destiny for you." Li Tianlan was silent. Just a few words about the mandate of heaven and the birth destiny had already made him dizzy. He looked at Wu Wei. Although he still didn't understand what he meant, it was obvious from his face that he didn't intend to say anything more. Li Tianlan picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea. The slightly bitter and cold tea flowed down his throat and into his stomach. He suddenly said, "Great Master, if I'm really doomed to die a horrible death, can what I've been asking for all my life come true?" What did he ask for all his life? It was to let his grandfather and those veterans walk out of the border again. It was to let Zhuanyuantai of Kunlun stand on the top of Zhongzhou State again. It was to let the reputation of the god of war family spread throughout the dark world again. 10 years later, if he really died a horrible death, could everything he had been pursuing succeed? At this moment, Li Tianlan suddenly found that he could face the possible death calmly. But what he had been asking for all his life was what he couldn't let go of. "Yes." Great Master Wu Wei hesitated for a moment and finally spoke in a concise tone. Li Tianlan laughed, and his eyes were bright without any haze. "So, although I'm not reconciled to it, it's not too bad. It's worth it." The old monk took a deep look at him and didn't speak. "You're so young. What's worth it? Don't talk nonsense here." Dongqing Hongguang's face darkened, and he reprimanded Li Tianlan mercilessly. His white hair was flying, his eyes were sharp, and his momentum soared in an instant. Li Tianlan didn't feel warm in his heart. Although it was the first time they met, the old master's behavior showed that he really didn't treat him as an outsider. "Great Master, if Tianlan's birth destiny is really changed by someone, what will happen in 10 years? Dongqing Hongguang stopped looking at Li Tianlan and looked directly at Great Master Wu Wei. His tone was calm, but his eyes were earnest. Great Master Wu Wei shook his head. "I don't have any good suggestions. There's still a long time. It depends on Benefactor Tianlan's own luck." Dongqing Hongguang's heart sank. Although he didn't hear any pessimism from the old monk's mouth, there was no optimism either. Dongqing Hongguang was a little worried about gains and losses. He didn't give up and asked, "Is there really no solution? Return to the mountains and forests and don't care about the world." Great Master Wu Wei turned the Buddha beads in his hand and said calmly. Dongqing Hongguang gave a wry smile and glanced at Li Tianlan. Sure enough, he didn't change his expression, as if he hadn't heard it. There was no difference between having such a method and not having it. I'm leaving. Great Master Wu Wei suddenly stood up, looked at Dongqing Hongguang, and said with a smile, "You and I are destined to meet in this life. If you don't mind, how about giving me a ride?" Li Tianlan, who was about to get up and see the old monk off when he heard that the old monk was going to leave, stopped and sat back on the sofa. It was obvious that the old monk wanted to talk to Dongqing Hongguang alone. Dongqing Hongguang was a little hesitant, not about whether to see him off, but about whether to let the old monk go down the mountain. Great Master Wu Wei was elusive. This time, the Dongqing clan could invite him up the mountain because of a cause and effect many years ago. For the Dongqing clan, it was a great favor. But such a favor was exchanged for such a result from the old monk. Dongqing Hongguang was really depressed. He stood up with a wry smile and walked out of the small reception room with the old monk. When they were about to step out of the reception room, Great Master Wu Wei in front of them suddenly turned around, looked at Li Tianlan, and said with a smile, "I'd like to give you a piece of advice. I'm afraid there will be a disaster in the near future. You should be careful and prudent." Li Tianlan was stunned, nodded, and said sincerely, "Thank you, Great Master." Great Master Wu Wei smiled and turned to leave. When he walked out of the gate of the villa, Dongqing Hongguang, who was unwilling, hesitated a little and finally said, "Great Master, is it a good thing or a bad thing that Tianlan's? Well, his birth destiny has been changed." Walking in the courtyard on the top of the mountain in the deep night, Great Master Wu Wei glanced at Dongqing Hongguang with a smile and said softly, "His birth destiny has just been formed. Now it seems that it's not much better. Destiny is not static, but there is a general trajectory. Changing one's birth destiny is probably the difference between 10 deaths and 9 deaths. It's not easy to change one's destiny against heaven and earth and fight for life with heaven and earth." Then, Dongqing Hongguang's face was gloomy. "Don't be too pessimistic. Now it's a narrow escape. Who knows what will happen in 10 years? Great Master Wu Wei chuckled and said, "Donor Dongqing, I'll give you a word of advice. Let nature take its course and don't force it. As for Donor Tianlan, after he graduates from the Sky Academy, he can come to Mount Qingyun in Lin and be my neighbor. It's good for him." Lin was the capital of Jiangxi province. Mount Qingyun was located on the bank of the West Lake. It was an excellent place with good feng shui. Dongqing Hongguang nodded and said helplessly, "I can see that the boy is stubborn." "Great Master, what if he doesn't go? His birth destiny has been formed, and his destiny has been determined. How can it be up to him?" Great Master Wu Wei smiled casually and reached for the car door, intending to go down the mountain. Dongqing Hongguang's heart skipped a beat and he suddenly asked, "Great Master, who changed Tianlan's birth destiny?" Great Master Wu Wei paused and turned to look at Dongqing Hongguang with deep eyes. He got into the car. When the door was about to close, a faint voice rang in Dongqing Hongguang's ears. "I changed it. Thank you for 544722292 Big Yuan Bao reward." Chapter 69. When Dongqing Hongguang walked back to the small reception room, he was obviously a little absent-minded. Li Tianlan was a little surprised, but he couldn't say anything. The hand on the clock was about to point to 5:00 in the morning. Looking at Dongqing Hongguang sitting on the sofa and meditating, Li Tianlan stood up and tentatively said, "Old master, if there's no other arrangement," he didn't finish his words, and he couldn't finish them. How could he go on? In the whole Dongqing clan, he was familiar with no one except Thunder God. Now he faced the old master of the Dongqing clan alone. What should he say? Go back to Huading without any arrangement? It was too impolite. Moreover, the other party invited Great Master Wu Wei to come and give him some advice. Although he didn't get any good words, the Dongqing clan's affection was obvious. It seemed a little inappropriate to leave now. But if I don't leave, will he arrange a place for me to rest? He doesn't regard me as an outsider. Li Tianlan thought he was a very reserved person and couldn't do such a thing. Oh, I forgot you, boy. Dongqing Hongguang's serious face relaxed slightly. He looked at Li Tianlan with a hearty smile. The old man looked calm and collected, but Li Tianlan felt uneasy. The old man's eyes were so strange, as if he was looking at a treasure. That kind of soft and surprised look appeared on an old man, and Li Tianlan instinctively got goosebumps. Come with me. Dongqing Hongguang patted Li Tianlan on the shoulder and went straight upstairs. Li Tianlan wasn't sure if the villa had an underground space, but the ground level was 4 stories high. Such a large luxury villa naturally had an elevator. Dongqing Hongguang took Li Tianlan into the elevator and went all the way up. Metaphysics is metaphysics. It exists, but it doesn't represent everything. I'm old, and the older I get, the more I believe in fate. But at the same time, I also believe in the saying that man can conquer nature. In the elevator, Dongqing Hongguang suddenly opened his mouth. He looked at Li Tianlan and said flatly, "Boy, I won't fool you. Great Master Wu Wei is arguably one of the most famous metaphysics grandmasters. What he said is a reference, even a very high reference value. With your temperament, you shouldn't be depressed by his words. But I'm afraid you'll go to the other extreme. You have a long life. Don't really think you have 10 years to live like that. It's not worth it. It's just stupid." Li Tianlan was stunned. He really didn't expect that Dongqing Hongguang would say this to him. He smiled and said calmly, "I won't be affected by a few words. No matter what happens in 10 years, I have to do what I have to do." Dongqing Hongguang's mind was in a mess. He nodded and said no more. The words that the old monk Wu Wei threw at him before he left were still echoing in his mind. Li Tianlan's birth destiny was changed by him. 20 years ago. What did this mean? At the very least, he could guarantee with the lives of his whole family that this matter had absolutely nothing to do with the Li family. Then how did Great Master Wu Wei know about Li Tianlan? And it was Li Tianlan who had not been born. Old Master Dongqing was upset for a while. When dealing with this kind of metaphysics grandmaster, the most terrible thing was that he didn't finish his words, which could make people want to hack him to death. The elevator reached the 4th floor. Dongqing Hongguang took a deep breath and walked out of the elevator. On one side of the elevator was a row of small stairs, about 1 story high, with a delicate small door at the end. "Come on," Dongqing Hongguang said and walked up the steps. Li Tianlan followed silently and watched the old man open the door. The night wind poured into the villa. A vast and boundless night appeared directly in front of Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan was stunned. Behind this door was not a secret room, but the rooftop of the villa. Dongqing Hongguang opened the door and walked out. Li Tianlan followed closely behind. The rooftop was large and clean, surrounded by white jade railings, exquisite and gorgeous. The wind was slightly strong and cold, which made people's minds suddenly clear. The light was dim as night and dawn alternated. Li Tianlan leaned on the white jade railing and looked around. Everywhere he looked, there was lush greenery, wide roads, dense forests, and vast plains. Standing there and looking, everything in his line of sight was downward. Only he was at the highest point, looking down at everything around him from the perspective of a bird's eye view. Li Tianlan was silent, but his heart was surging with emotions. "Tianlan, what do you think a man should pursue the most in his life?" Dongqing Hongguang stood beside Li Tianlan, lit a cigarette, took a big drag, and asked in a gentle tone. The corner of Li Tianlan's mouth moved. In this situation, he suddenly thought of a poem. Without hesitation, he said it. "When you reach the top, all the mountains are small." Dongqing Hongguang laughed and said heroically, "Yes, to reach the top, this is a man's life pursuit." He pointed to the mountain under his feet and said with a smile, "Tianlan, what do you think of the Dongqing clan?" Li Tianlan had nothing to say. In his heart, it was not a clan, but a mountain. The villa where Dongqing Hongguang lived was located at the top of the mountain. On the way up, there were some forks. Li Tianlan didn't think much of it at first, but standing at the top of the mountain, he found that the so-called Dongqing clan was more than just a villa under his feet. This was just the center. Around the top of the mountain, in different directions, there were villas with similar architectural styles. Li Tianlan was not sure how big the mountain was for the time being, but standing here and looking at it, the magnificent momentum was really admirable. The atmosphere of a wealthy family is well-deserved. Li Tianlan said softly, with a trace of longing in his calm tone that he didn't even realize. This was the first time he had come to the headquarters of a top wealthy family in Zhongzhou State. Everything in front of him brought him nothing but shock and desire. Dongqing Hongguang stopped smiling, but his boldness did not diminish. He said in a powerful voice, "This is my family, the Dongqing clan with hundreds of thousands of troops, the Dongqing clan with the power to lead a group, the Dongqing clan with nearly 20 large military enterprises, the Dongqing clan that can make dozens of senior military generals bow their heads, and the Dongqing clan with a market value of hundreds of billions." He patted Li Tianlan on the shoulder hard and said with a smile, "Do you want such a family?" The corner of Li Tianlan's mouth moved. Such a question was so rude that no one could be flustered. He took a deep breath and said softly, "It's a lie to say that I don't want it." Dongqing Hongguang looked at Li Tianlan with a smile on his face. He could clearly feel the fire in the eyes of the young man beside him. This almost fanatical light was called ambition. Every man should have ambition. "Then I'll give you the Dongqing clan, how about it?" Dongqing Hongguang said softly, but the content was earth-shattering. Li Tianlan's body shook violently. He looked at Dongqing Hongguang with a stunned face. "You don't want it?" Dongqing Hongguang frowned slightly. His reaction was completely unexpected. "I can't afford it," Li Tianlan said with a wry smile. At this moment, he was really a little scared and even felt that there was something wrong with the old man beside him. Give the Dongqing clan to him. He couldn't think of any other possibility except that the old man was crazy. "What? Didn't your grandfather tell you? You have an engagement with the Dongqing clan. After you marry Rushi, I'll give the Dongqing clan to you. Everything here is yours, including the border Praetorian Corps," Dongqing Hongguang said calmly. Li Tianlan felt a headache. He knew that he had an engagement, but his old man didn't say with whom. When he first saw Qin Weibai and felt her deep love, Li Tianlan even guessed that Qin Weibai was his fiancée. The Dongqing clan. In Li Tianlan's previous impression, it seemed to have nothing to do with him. The appearance of Thunder God tonight connected him with the Dongqing clan. Li Tianlan had a vague guess in his heart, but it was just a guess. Now that he heard Dongqing Hongguang admit it, the truth of the so-called engagement was revealed. Rushi? Dongqing Rushi? Li Tianlan thought silently. He had heard of this name for a long time. She was one of the core disciples of Jade Pool and the youngest daughter of Dongqing Wudi. She had exquisite bone and was a 19-year-old expert of the fire-flaming realm. She was even one place ahead of Li Beidian in the ranking of the top 10 experts of the young generation. When Li Tianlan heard this name before, he had always regarded Dongqing Rushi as an opponent he might meet in the future. As a result, his opponent became his fiancée. This change was too big. At least, Li Tianlan couldn't accept it for a while. He lit a cigarette and took a big drag. His mind was in a mess. That's it. You still have a few days off, right? Stay in Zhongyuan for 2 days. I'll inform some old friends later. You and Rushi get engaged first and exchange rings or something. Isn't that popular among you young people now? I understand. You can get married after graduation. Dongqing Hongguang said quickly without waiting for Li Tianlan to react. He seemed to think of something happy and laughed strangely. His eyes were almost invisible because of the laughter. Well, sorry. Old master. I can't be engaged to Miss Dongqing, let alone marry her. Li Tianlan suddenly interrupted Dongqing Hongguang in a calm and indifferent tone. Dongqing Hongguang's laughter stopped abruptly. You won't marry her? He seemed to be in disbelief and asked subconsciously. I won't marry her. Li Tianlan's tone was firm. Dongqing Hangguang stared at Li Tianlan, and his face suddenly became gloomy. He said coldly, You are engaged. My granddaughter is talented and beautiful. In terms of appearance, temperament, and talent in martial arts, among her peers, only the little demon girl of the Wang family of Beihai can compare with Rushi. You won't marry such a good match. Who do you want to marry? Why don't you marry her? If you dare not marry her, I'll have someone kill you, you little bastard. Li Tianlan touched his nose and smiled bitterly. Dongqing Hangguang's words were not polite at all, but he just didn't dislike it. He shook his head and said sincerely, Old master, I have a girlfriend, and I will marry her. Dongqing Hangguang, who didn't understand the situation for the time being, was stunned and said casually, Just break up. Don't talk so much nonsense. I tell you, you must marry Rushi. There is no room for negotiation. No. Li Tianlan said without hesitation. His words were light and breezy, but resolute and decisive. Dongqing Hangguang's carefully trimmed beard curled up. He was flustered and exasperated, staring at Li Tianlan with disappointment. Damn it, my beautiful and pure genius granddaughter will marry you, and the whole Dongqing clan will be the dowry. How dare you say no? He breathed heavily. At this moment, he really wanted to kill the little bastard. Even if you can't, you have to. The old man clenched the white jade railing in front of him and said, gnashing his teeth. Li Tianlan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He threw away the cigarette but in his hand, lit another one, and handed one to Dongqing Hangguang. He said helplessly, Old master, to tell you the truth, I have a little potential. If there is no accident, there will be no problem for me to enter the invincible realm. I don't belittle myself. In terms of value, I still have some. But the Dongqing clan is, after all, a family with a heavenly son. It is not worthwhile to take out the whole family as the dowry for a son-in-law who may become an invincible realm expert in the future, right? Dongqing Hangguang was stunned. Heavenly son. What heavenly son? Before he had time to ask, Li Tianlan continued, and my identity is sensitive. This secret can't be hidden forever. Once others know that I'm from the Li family, I'm afraid the Dongqing clan will also face pressure. The Prince Group, Kunlun City, and even the Wang family of Beihai will probably be eager to attack me. My identity is now a big quagmire. Once it is exposed, it is easy to involve the people around me. On the contrary, the Dongqing clan is already so large. Even if I enter the invincible realm, I will not be of much help to the Dongqing clan. This kind of engagement is immature. Not only can I not help you, but I will also drag you down. Old master, why do you insist? What nonsense is this? Dongqing Hangguang frowned and repeated the old tune. He was so persistent that it made people cry. You have an engagement with my granddaughter, so you must get married. The Dongqing clan at least needs its face, and it can't do something like putting the whole clan on the line just to win you over. The Dongqing clan will be you and Rushi in the future. It has nothing to do with winning you over. This is an engagement, understand? The Dongqing clan keeps its promise. We repay kindness with kindness. This has nothing to do with your background or your potential. These words were said with confidence, but Li Tianlan instinctively chose not to believe it. He silently smoked and whispered to himself, repay kindness with kindness, repay kindness with kindness. Old master, what do you think of my father's treason? Li Tianlan suddenly asked. Dongqing Hangguang's expression changed. He took a deep look at him and said hesitantly, the inside story of that matter is complicated, and many clues are unclear. I'm not talking about that. Li Tianlan quietly looked at the gradually brightening morning light in the distance and said calmly. Dongqing Hangguang was stunned and immediately understood what Li Tianlan meant. He was silent for a while and whispered, Tianlan, do you have a knot in your heart because the Dongqing clan didn't do anything? No, I'm just asking. Li Tianlan shook his head. I'm not being polite. I can understand. The Wang family of Beihai, the closest comrade in arms of the Li family, could choose silence and give up. It's reasonable for the Dongqing clan to stand by. Old master, I was rude just now. Silence. Dongqing Hongguang was silent for nearly 5 minutes this time. He lit another cigarette and said calmly, I can answer this question. First, the friendship between the Dongqing clan and the Li family was very hidden. Almost no one knew about it except for the two sides. Second, that matter was of great importance. It was a game of the overall situation. The Dongqing clan represented the giant group. In that situation, the Dongqing clan couldn't represent itself at all. As soon as we spoke, everyone would think that it was the will of the entire giant group. He paused and continued, third, if the Dongqing clan had an invincible realm expert, we would have to ask the Li family for an explanation afterward. Unfortunately, we don't have such an expert. Fourth, the Dongqing clan secretly helped the Li family. Tianlan, you'll see what we've done later. Now is not the time to tell you. As for the engagement between you and Rushi, it was made by your grandfather and me. There's no complicated interest entanglement. We've waited for so many years, but you suddenly told me that you didn't want to marry her. Who would agree? Rushi is my granddaughter. You have to marry her whether you want to or not. Li Tianlan touched his chin. There seemed to be something wrong with this picture. His grandfather said that the family with whom he was engaged was very realistic. But how could Dongqing Hongguang's performance be realistic? He was simply letting his emotions affect his decisions. Li Tianlan's heart suddenly moved. He thought of what Dongqing Hongguang had just said and hesitated. If you have something to say, say it. Dongqing Hongguang glanced at him and said. That, Li Tianlan suppressed the story of the Li family and the Dongqing clan. At the same time, he quietly shifted the topic of the engagement to a topic he had always been particularly interested in. As for the engagement, it was better not to talk about it. He smiled and said, Old master, can I ask you about someone? Ask about what person? Don't change the subject, boy. Dongqing Hongguang took a drag on his cigarette, his eyes puzzled. Well, the Dongqing clan's sacrifice you just mentioned, is it related to Senior Dongqing Huang too? How on earth did he? Ahem. Before Li Tianlan could finish his words, Dongqing Hongguang coughed violently. He seemed to be choked by the cigarette. He coughed so hard that he couldn't straighten up for a long time. Li Tianlan subconsciously walked over and patted the old man on the back. He said with a wry smile, I just accidentally heard some of Senior Dongqing Huangtu's deeds. If you don't want to say it, then forget it. Dongqing Hongguang waved his hand with difficulty and said in a hoarse voice, Who did you just say? Senior Dongqing Huangtu. Li Tianlan knew that he might be suspected of rubbing salt in the wound, but he hesitated and said it again. Dongqing Hongguang straightened up and looked at Li Tianlan with a complicated look in his eyes. Li Tianlan braced himself to look at the old man, feeling a little creepy for no reason. I don't know the person you're talking about. Dongqing Hongguang finally said, there is no such person in the Dongqing clan. As for outside the Dongqing clan, I've never heard of this person. Chapter 70. Since coming to the Dongqing clan, Li Tianlan had encountered more accidents than accidents. He was a little confused about Great Master Wuwei's claim that he changed his fate. Now Dongqing Hongguang told him that the Dongqing clan did not have Dongqing Huangtu. Li Tianlan felt a little uncomfortable. In terms of combat capability, Dongqing Huangtu definitely deserved the title of Heavenly Son. If such a person did not die, the reputation of the Dongqing clan could even catch up with that of the Wang family of Beihai in a few decades. But such a Heavenly Son died of siege and betrayal, which was definitely the most painful scar of the Dongqing clan. When Li Tianlan mentioned Dongqing Huangtu, he could understand and accept that the people of the Dongqing clan would be angry, sad, or in pain. But he did not expect that Dongqing Hongguang would say that he had never heard of this person. Of course, Li Tianlan didn't believe it. Not to mention how weird Dongqing Hanguang's reaction was. Even Qin Weibai couldn't lie to him, and there was no need to fabricate a non-existent heavenly son to fool him. Was it a taboo in Zhongzhou state? Li Tianlan was thoughtful. What did Dongqing Huangtu's past and death mean? Old master, have you really never heard of this person? Li Tianlan did not give up and asked again. In the beginning, wanting to know more about Dongqing Huangtu was just one of his interests. But now, his curiosity was aroused. What on earth did he do back then? Even his own family members claimed that he did not exist. It was simply incredible. No. Dongqing Hanguang's voice was hoarse, and his eyes were blank and confused. In an angle that Li Tianlan could not see, he chuckled and said calmly, Tianlan, where did you hear this name? What else do you know about this person? From a friend, Senior Huangtu was besieged and died, snap. Before Li Tianlan finished speaking, Dongqing Hanguang's hands suddenly tightened on the white jade railing. The jade railing was broken into powder in his palm. The powder slid down his palm, fluttered, and was blown away by the wind. Dongqing Hanguang was expressionless and pale. Li Tianlan shut up subconsciously. With the old master's reaction, it was obviously not appropriate to talk about Dongqing Huangtu. But this dead heavenly son had taken root in his heart and gave birth to countless possibilities. Anything else? Dongqing Hanguang suddenly asked. Li Tianlan glanced at him and shook his head. He suddenly thought, since Dongqing Huangtu was besieged and died because of betrayal, then who was it that besieged him? Who had betrayed him? Were these the enemies of the Dongqing clan or his own? Would the Dongqing clan have the same enemy as him? If the answer was yes, then Li Tianlan seemed to have found a way to take advantage of Dongqing Rushi even if he didn't marry her. In his sight, a black Mercedes-Benz slowly drove along the mountain road into the courtyard and stopped in front of the main entrance of the villa. When the car door opened, Dongqing Wudi and Thunder God, who had left at the foot of the mountain a few hours ago, got off. A very beautiful woman got off with them. Li Tianlan was stunned. Was this Dongqing Rushi? It didn't look like it. The woman looked to be about 25 or 26 years old. She was plump and beautiful, and her eyes were gentle. She wore a pair of exquisite gold-rimmed glasses, and a faint smile hung at the corner of her mouth. Her every move revealed a kind of steadiness and calmness. Dongqing Rushi, who was 19 years old this year, could be called a girl, but the one in front of him was a beautiful young woman. Let's go down for dinner. Dongqing Hanguang glanced down and said in a low voice. It seemed that his mood was also affected by the mention of Dongqing Huangtu. Li Tianlan felt a little apologetic and followed Dongqing Hanguang downstairs in silence. Almost at the same time when they walked out of the elevator, Dongqing Wudi and the other two also walked into the villa. Seeing his father and Li Tianlan, Dongqing Wudi was stunned. Then he quickly walked over and whispered, Dad. Thunder God didn't follow. The beautiful young woman that Li Tianlan had just met smiled and called him Grandpa. She glanced at Li Tianlan and nodded with a smile. Her smile was warm and elegant. It was a kind of pure gentleness that only women had, like a clear spring, sweet and irresistible. Li Tianlan's heart sank. Was it really Dongqing Rushi? There was something wrong with her attitude. Beside him, Dongqing Hanguang was in a low mood, but he didn't forget to introduce her. He said calmly, Tianlan, this is my granddaughter, Dongqing Chuchi. You can call her sister from now on. She works in Huading now. If you need anything in the future, you can ask her. Hello, Sister Chuchi. Li Tianlan felt a little relieved and took the initiative to extend his hand with a smile. As far as he knew, although Dongqing Hanguang was still in charge of the Dongqing clan, the old master was only in charge of the general direction. In fact, the patriarch of the Dongqing clan had become Dongqing Wudi. This top family that dominated Zhongyuan was also prosperous, but Dongqing Wudi only had 2 daughters. The one in front of him was undoubtedly the elder daughter, and the younger one was Dongqing Rushi. Although Dongqing Qiuqi looked young, she should be close to 30 or even in her early 30s. Was it because Dongqing Wudi had no son that the old master gave the Dongqing clan to his son-in-law as a dowry? It seemed better to give it to someone from other branches than to outsiders, right? Working in Huading. Li Tianlan was a little curious. He didn't know what Dongqing Qiuqi was doing in Huading. Hello, Tianlan. Let's exchange contact information later. You can call me at any time if you need anything. I'm not far from your campus. Dongqing Qiuqi smiled and reached out her small hand to shake Li Tianlan's. She was a gentle and elegant woman who spoke softly and was very comfortable to get along with. Li Tianlan nodded with a smile. Where's Rushi? Dongqing Hongguang suddenly asked, why didn't she come for dinner? The smile in his eyes flashed away. He chuckled and said, why? Is the girl shy? Li Tianlan's body slightly stiffened. He didn't know how he felt about his fiancée, whom he had never met. Dongqing Wudi was also a little embarrassed. The dignified god of massacre of Zhongzhou state dodged the old master's eyes and whispered, Rushi just returned to Yuzhou. What happened? Dongqing Rushi was a little confused. Didn't they agree? Why did she suddenly go back? Yesterday, his precious granddaughter said that she wanted to meet her fiancé. As a result, the fiancé came, but she left. What was going on? Dongqing Wudi became more and more embarrassed and subconsciously glanced at Li Tianlan. In fact, it was not that Dongqing Rushi didn't want to. Dongqing Wudi was very clear about the engagement between the two families. His daughter might be a little confused and nervous, but she didn't resist much. She even acquiesced. At least she didn't object to them getting along with each other for a while. He could only blame himself for being so excited that he accidentally mentioned Li Tianlan's girlfriend when he picked up his daughter. Then things became like this. In such a scene, his daughter was not jealous, but she must feel wronged. Dongqing Wudi's mouth moved, and his heart was in a mess. This matter might be a knot in his heart if he didn't deal with it well. There's something urgent in Yuzhou, so I have to go back. She said that she would go to Huading to find Tianlan after a while. Dongqing Wudi gave a half-true and half-false explanation. In fact, Dongqing Rushi also said that she didn't want to get engaged too early. She hoped that she and Li Tianlan would get married after graduation. However, Dongqing Wudi didn't dare to say that. If he did, he might face the anger of the old master. Not only the old master, but Dongqing Wudi himself also couldn't wait for the marriage of the two children. Forget it. Let's eat first. Dongqing Hongguang was even more confused. He didn't ask more and walked to the dining room. The breakfast was depressed and silent. Li Tianlan sat down next to Thunder God and only cared about eating and drinking. Dongqing Hongguang was absent-minded. After eating a bowl of porridge, he didn't eat much. When Li Tianlan put down the bowl and chopsticks, he also got up and said calmly, Qiuqi, take Tianlan to rest. Let him stay with Rushi. I'll call Rushi later to ask about the situation. Okay. Dongqing Qiuqi smiled gently, looked at Li Tianlan and said, follow me. Li Tianlan said goodbye to Dongqing Hongguang, his son, and Thunder God in turn, and then walked out of the villa. Dongqing Qiuqi waited quietly outside. When she saw Li Tianlan come out, she smiled and looked him up and down with a strange look in her eyes. She didn't say anything. Li Tianlan's heart ached badly. Did this woman think of him as a gigolo who coveted the power of the Dongqing clan? The corner of his mouth moved. When he was about to speak, Dongqing Qiuqi, who was gentle to the bones, chuckled and said, Tianlan, treat my sister better in the future, okay? Otherwise, I'll deal with you. You're in Huading, so it's very easy for me to deal with you. Big sister, I haven't even seen your sister. Isn't it too early to say this? Li Tianlan complained in his heart and said casually, what does Sister Qiuqi do in Huading? The mayor of Wudong New District. Dongqing Qiuqi smiled and said, even your Sky Academy is also within the scope of Wudong New District. Although we can't control it, we can still exert influence. The mayor of Wudong New District. Li Tianlan looked at Dongqing Qiuqi, who was smiling gently in front of him. He couldn't connect this position with her. In Huading, Wudong New District could be said to be the most important district. The mayor was usually a member of the standing committee, who was a senior official at the level of deputy governor. Moreover, it was a very high position. In this case, Dongqing Qiuqi, the second in command, was only one step away from the standing committee. He wondered if she was 30 years old this year. The Dongqing clan is really full of talents. It deserves to be a family that has produced a heavenly son. Li Tianlan sighed softly, but he was carefully observing Dongqing Qiuqi's expression out of the corner of his eye. Dongqing Hongguang refused to reveal anything, but Dongqing Qiuqi should know something, right? Dongqing Huangtu was her uncle. Heavenly son. What heavenly son? Dongqing Qiuqi was stunned and asked curiously. Isn't His Highness Dongqing Huangtu a heavenly son? Li Tianlan asked seriously. He knew he shouldn't ask this question, but he didn't know why he always instinctively wanted to know more about this person. Dongqing Qiuqi's face was blank. It was a real blank, not a superficial emotion hidden behind sadness, anger, and pain. She looked at Li Tianlan and asked curiously, who is Dongqing Huangtu? When Li Tianlan walked out of the villa, Dongqing Hongguang also called Dongqing Wudi and Thunder God into his study. In the study, the old master finally stopped hiding his feelings, and his expression became gloomy. Dongqing Wudi coughed. Looking at his father's face, he didn't dare to speak, but just gave Thunder God a wink. Thunder God twitched slightly and looked at Dongqing Wudi. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out, but the shape of his mouth was clear. Damn you! Dongqing Wudi glared and clenched his fists, his eyes flashing fiercely. Thunder God immediately gave in. Looking at Dongqing Hongguang, who was sitting in the chair in silence, he took the initiative to say with a dry smile, Godfather, Rushi really has something urgent in Yuzhou. Don't be angry. When she finishes dealing with it, she will definitely go to Huading to find Tianlan. Not because of this. Dongqing Hongguang shook his head, suddenly looked at Thunder God, and said in a deep voice, Lei, when you took Tianlan to the desert, did you say anything to him that you shouldn't say? Thunder God was stunned for a moment and muttered to himself, something that I shouldn't say. Then he shook his head and said with certainty, no. Dad, what the hell is going on? Dongqing Wudi asked, picking up the teacup and pouring a glass of water for Dongqing Wudi. Just now, when we were on the rooftop, Tianlan asked me a question. Dongqing Hongguang frowned tightly and said in a low voice, he wants to know something about Huangtu that year. Something about that year? Crack. Dongqing Wudi's hand shook, and the teacup in his hand fell directly to the floor and broke into pieces. How is this possible? The expression of this marshal of Zhongzhou state, who could always be calm in the face of anything, changed dramatically, and he subconsciously raised his voice. How did he know about Huangtu? Dongqing Hongguang glanced at him and said nothing. Aren't you curious about what that kid meant by that year? Thunder God suddenly said, what does he know? He said that Huangtu was besieged that year. How on earth did he know this name? There's something wrong with this kid. Dongqing Hongguang whispered, and his face was gloomy, making it impossible to tell what he was thinking. It's not him who's wrong, it's Qin Weibai, and it can only be her. Dongqing Wudi suddenly said. Qin Weibai. Dongqing Hongguang froze for a moment, and then said, is it the one from Samsara? That's Tianlan's girlfriend. It can only be her who told Tianlan. Dongqing Wudi nodded. Mentioning Qin Weibai gave him a bigger headache. What kind of nonsense was this? The point is, how did Qin Weibai know about Huangtu? How could she know? Thunder God sounded confused. At present, it can only be her who knows. It can't be Tianlan himself, can it? Dongqing Wudi asked in reply. The study suddenly became silent. The three of them looked at each other and could see a trace of panic and fear in each other's eyes. Go and check it out. Dongqing Hangguang suddenly said, I'm afraid she knows more than that. Send someone to check it out. We must find out what's going on. Dad, I'll talk to her myself. Dongqing Wudi took a deep breath and said calmly. Dongqing Hangguang glanced at him and nodded. Be careful. Dongqing Wudi said, Dad, what about Great Master Wu Wei? It's okay. Don't worry. Dongqing Hangguang forced a smile. The name Dongqing Huangtu had almost made the three of them confused. If they told him what Great Master Wu Wei thought of Li Tianlan at this time, it would only make him more confused. The melodious ringtone of a cell phone rang. Thunder God froze for a moment and quickly took out his mobile phone to answer. No one knew what the person on the other end of the phone said. Thunder God hung up, looking calm. Godfather, Marshal, there's news from the desert. Dongqing Hangguang narrowed his eyes and said thoughtfully, Wang Xingshao. Wang Xingshao, the heir of the Wang family of Beihai, had been called a young heavenly son in recent years. He was about to break through the fire-flaming realm and enter the thunder-shocking realm. Wang Tianzong's trip to the desert with him attracted the attention of almost all the major forces. Everyone knew that there was a whetstone in the desert of the best quality for the fire-flaming realm. Whether Wang Xingshao could break through successfully on this trip was what all the major forces were concerned about. Thunder God nodded. It ended in a draw. Dongqing Hangguang nodded and sneered without saying anything. He's not as good as Tianlan back then. Thunder God chuckled, his eyes pleased. I just don't know if the one in Kunlun City dares to go to the desert. Him. Chapter 71. When the morning sun rose and the darkness receded. A fierce battle that lasted nearly 5 hours came to an end. Light and darkness alternated. In the battlefield that spanned thousands of meters, the sharp sword intent and the violent fighting intent had yet to dissipate completely. Yellow sand was everywhere in sight, rising and falling with the strong wind. A large area of fire and the yellow sand almost merged into one, burning continuously. The long night had just passed. The temperature in the desert should be the coldest, but the blazing heat spread to every corner of the battlefield, making people breathless. This was the Dead Sea of Zhongzhou State, located in the south of Beijiang Province. It was the largest desert in the territory of tens of millions of square kilometers in Zhongzhou State. The Dead Sea Desert was famous for three things: the relic, the poplar, and the prison. Many people knew that in the depths of the Dead Sea, there was the most mysterious and heavily guarded prison in Zhongzhou State. There were even rumors among the people, but few people knew the specific location of the prison. The prison was codenamed Impasse, and it lived up to its name. For the prisoners here, it was a impasse. There was no hope, no goal, and no fantasy. They could only suffer here day after day and stay in the boring and maddening environment until they died. There were no ordinary prisoners here. Cold and cruel killers, ferocious mercenaries, terrorists, military spies, international thieves, and traitors. Every criminal had a relatively glorious past. Ordinary criminals were not qualified to be imprisoned here at all. The battle that had already ended took place near the Impasse prison, less than 2 kilometers away from the prison. In the environment of yellow sand everywhere, as the sun rose, the yellow prison gradually merged with the whole desert. There was no distinction between them. The wind rose and stopped. The yellow sand returned to the desert. On the battlefield, a young man who looked very young struggled to stand up and walked forward. The young man was handsome and in his early 20s. He was tall and slender, and his temperament was steady and sharp. He deserved the reputation of an elegant child. However, at this time, the battle that lasted for several hours had just ended, and his image was obviously a little bad. The clothes on the young man's body were almost completely torn. His upper body was bare, with only a few pieces of cloth hanging on it. Bright red blood had already covered his entire upper body, and there was even a wound on his face that was bleeding. He dragged a broad sword in his hand. The body of the sword was simple and heavy, wide and long, and it was completely black. As he walked, The edge of the sword that pierced into the yellow sand directly cut a deep gully in his path. Just from this alone, one could see the terrifying weight of the heavy sword. His lips were tightly pursed while his expression was firm, and his narrow and long eyes seemed to still be burning with violent battle intent. At this moment, he'd already thrown away his modest and calm facade, and he walked forward proudly amidst the vast expanse of yellow sand while emanating an arrogant and domineering aura that disregarded everything. He moved forward for 20 meters. He stopped in front of an old man who was lying on the ground, bowed deeply, and said softly, "Thank you, Uncle Hua." The old man was actually not that old. At most, he was less than 60 years old. His face was withered, and his black and white hair was greasy and messy. He was dressed in gray clothes that were loose and shabby. It was the most standard outfit of a prisoner. At this moment, he was sitting on the ground weakly. He looked miserable and miserable. He calmly accepted the salute of the noble young man in front of him and laughed at himself. "I'm old and can't fight anymore. I've wasted a lot of my strength over the years. If I were younger, you might not be my opponent. Uncle Hua deserves the title of the first in the fire-flaming realm. I didn't win this battle, and you didn't lose either. You deserve to be the strongest in the fire-flaming realm." The young man chuckled and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. For him, this battle was indeed a draw. Both of them were seriously injured. Although he seemed to be in a better state now, he was dozens of years younger than his opponent. If they fought to the death, the result would basically be mutual destruction. How could he say he won? How could he say he lost? The strongest in the fire-flaming realm, when the young man first heard this, he inevitably felt a little dissatisfied. But after the battle, he was so strong at this age and even suppressed him in the beginning. He was convinced of this kind of combat strength. He took a deep breath, put down the heavy sword in his hand, and sat opposite the old man. He said seriously, "Uncle Hua, how about going back to Beihai with me? In the future, I need you to guide me in my cultivation." "No." The old man didn't even lift his eyelids and directly refused the tempting suggestion. He simply said, "I'm fine here. I stay in a small space of 2 or 3 square meters every day and occasionally come out to look at the sand. I've been used to it for so many years. I can't afford the glory and wealth of the Wang family of Beihai." The young man opened his mouth, and his eyes were complicated. He was the strongest in the fire-flaming realm, who could regard most of the peak of the fire-flaming realm as nothing. It was better to say that he had been imprisoned here for 20 years than to say that he had been locked up in the impasse prison for 20 years. Why bother? The young man smiled bitterly. The fighting intent in his eyes gradually faded, and his eyes gradually became gentle and clear. His whole person had a trace of gentleness that was inconsistent with the heavy sword beside him. He didn't look aggressive or aggressive at all. The old man didn't answer. No one knew whether he was unwilling or disdainful. The young man also fell silent. He had heard of the old man in front of him when he entered the fire-flaming realm a few years ago. Many people might have also heard of him. This was the strongest expert in the fire-flaming realm at that time. For many years, he had been the best whetstone in the eyes of some fire-flaming realm geniuses. But over the years, as far as he knew, it seemed that he was the only one who dared to use him as a whetstone. Whetstone, the young man frowned slightly. He didn't feel anything when he first heard this title. But when he saw the old man's current state and recalled the word, he suddenly felt it was a little harsh. How glorious was the old man back then? Known as the strongest expert in the fire-flaming realm, he had successively served as the deputy commander of the capital garrison, the deputy minister of the guard department of Zhongzhou State, the first deputy minister of the Ministry of Security, and the first deputy army commander of the border Praetorian Corps. He had followed 2 gods of war in Zhongzhou State. Whether in the era of Li Honghe or Li Guangtu, he was one of their sacred guards, codenamed Fireman. In the dark world of that era, he was more than famous. But now, he was locked up in the most mysterious prison in Zhongzhou State. Every day, he holed up in a small space of only a few square meters. He couldn't even stretch his arms and legs. Used to it? How could he get used to it? The young man sighed softly. When the war god family collapsed, the role played by his family could not be regarded as despicable, but it was not related to the bright and mighty. Fireman's inner obsession and not were hard to solve, so it was reasonable that he did not want to return to the Wang family of Beihai. Let's go. Fireman suddenly stood up and said, and then walked to the nearby impasse prison without looking back. Brother Fire, this is a good wine specially prepared for you. Aren't you going to have a sip? A gentle voice sounded. It was plain, but as soon as the words came out, they reverberated in the whole world nearby and were clearly heard from all directions. Fireman stopped and slowly looked back. In sight was still the same yellow sand, undulating sand dunes, as far as the eye could see. On a sand dune 1,000 meters away, a tiny figure that looked like a black dot stood up. In an instant, everything in front of Fireman seemed to disappear, leaving only the small figure in front of him. The figure took a step forward, and his figure became clear in an instant. The second step was taken. All the yellow sand nearby began to tremble and float. A storm suddenly formed in the desert, whistling and rotating around him. The third step. The storm was still. And he appeared in front of Fireman. This was a man whose specific age could not be seen at all. He had the steadiness of a 30-year-old, the vicissitudes of a 40-year-old, and the open-mindedness of a 50-year-old. He appeared beside Fireman with a chuckle. He was ordinary, but in a trance, he seemed to have become the center of the whole world. It was an indescribable taste. He didn't need any momentum. As long as he stood there, he was the momentum. A kind of momentum that was abundant and majestic enough to shake the world, was like the coming wind and rain, like the dark clouds pressing down on the city, like thunder on the flat ground, like the surging tide of the deep sea, abundant and unstoppable. Sword Emperor of Zhongzhou State, the top expert of Zhongzhou State, the top expert of the world divine list, patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, Wang Tianzong. Fireman looked at him calmly without saying a word. Wang Tianzong raised the bottle in his hand and said with a smile, "Are you in such a hurry?" "He's in a hurry." Fireman pointed to the young man behind Wang Tianzong and said in a calm tone, "It doesn't matter." Wang Tianzong opened the bottle and said calmly, "All the land under the sky belongs to the king. Where can't I break through? Where can't I break through?" His words were calm, but there was a kind of extreme confidence between the lines. Fireman nodded, took the wine that Wang Tianzong handed over, and drank most of the bottle in one breath. The wine went into his stomach. The spicy feeling burned his heart and lungs. Fireman held his breath for a long time before he let it out. His face turned red and he said, "Good wine. I made it at home. Would you like to go back with me and have a taste? It's good enough." Wang Tianzong chuckled, his eyes deep. Fireman shook his head, glanced at Wang Xingxiao, the heir of the Wang family of Beihai, who was already sitting on the ground and meditating, and said blandly, "No, he's about to break through to the fire-flaming realm, and there's no need to go. It's really a waste here." Wang Tianzong said blandly, "In my impression, you're still the fireman who tried to go straight from the fire-flaming realm to the invincible realm. You dare to ignore the thunder-shocking realm and don't stick to the rules. Even if you're laughed at, you'll firmly walk out of your own martial arts path. You're not the miserable and decadent old man now. Brother Fire, come with me. There's still a chance now." "Chance?" Fireman took another big gulp, smiled bitterly, pointed to his face, and said, "What chance do I have now? I'm almost 60 years old. For hundreds of years, have you ever seen anyone who entered the invincible realm at the age of 60? For hundreds of years, no one has tried to go straight from the fire-flaming realm to the invincible realm and regarded the thunder-shocking realm as nothing. 20 years ago, it seemed that you were the only one, right?" Wang Tianzong's tone was still bland. But Fireman heard something wrong. 20 years ago, he was the only one who tried to go straight to the invincible realm. What about 20 years later? Do you think the path I took back then, can it be taken? Are there people like me out there now? Fireman asked seriously after a long silence. He might have a knot in his heart for the Wang family of Beihai, but for martial arts, even if he knew that he had no chance, he hoped to hear other people's comments and get their recognition. Now the world's #1 expert was in front of him, and he hoped to prove from Wang Tianzong that his efforts were not wasted. I don't know. Wang Tianzong smiled bitterly. Our paths are different. The path you took was unheard of, and even Senior Li didn't approve of it. If you don't enter the thunder-shocking realm, who knows what the real limit of the fire-flaming realm is? Your combat capability was comparable to the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, but you didn't touch the threshold from the fire-flaming realm to the invincible realm, did you? How can I know if you don't know? His eyes twinkled and he said thoughtfully, but now there is a madman outside like you. He is an assassin. Half a year ago, he tried to go straight from the chi-controlling realm to the invincible realm. When he was close to success, he failed and almost went into chi deviation. I don't know the specific situation. Brother Fire, do you want to go with me to have a look? He jumped from the chi-controlling realm to the ice-condensing realm, the fire-flaming realm, and the thunder-shocking realm to the invincible realm. It was not too much to say that such a person was a madman. No. Fireman still shook his head and simply said, you said that our paths are different. Wang Tianzong sighed softly. Looking at the determination in Fireman's eyes, he didn't persuade him, but whispered, Brother Fire, do you think there is anything that Xingxiao can improve? Fireman hesitated a little, nodded, and pointed to the yellow sand under his feet. Wang Tianzong immediately understood what he meant, shook his head, and said calmly, underground? It's not necessary. Today, the Wang family of Beihai doesn't need this method. Such improvement is tantamount to nitpicking, just like the invincible manual in the map of God of War of the Li family. When the Li family was at its peak, which God of War didn't think that the invincible manual was of little value? It's strong, but who is willing to practice it unless they are in a desperate situation? Now the Wang family of Beihai doesn't need its heir to take risks. The more stable, the better, not to mention the kind of risk of death or even death. Fireman drank the last sip of wine, nodded, threw the bottle on the ground, and turned away in silence. Wang Tianzong quietly watched Fireman's fading figure and suddenly said, Brother Fire, don't you need an explanation for what happened that year? I can explain. Fireman calmly moved forward, without looking back, and said indifferently, as long as you have a clear conscience. The muscles on Wang Tianzong's face twitched violently, and his eyes were bitter. Brother Fire, do you have a clear conscience today? He took a deep breath and continued to ask. I've done my best today. What's there to be ashamed of? Fireman asked in reply. Wang Tianzong let out a sigh of relief and nodded. Thank you. Fireman didn't give in to Wang Xingxiao, which proved that Wang Xingxiao's fire-flaming realm had indeed reached the extreme, and he could smoothly break through to the thunder-shocking realm. He didn't need the hopeless cross-realm to enter the invincible realm. Hundreds of years of facts had proved that step by step was the best choice. Fireman walked back to the prison in silence. From beginning to end, he never looked back. Dad. Behind Wang Tianzong, Wang Xingxiao's happy voice sounded. Wang Tianzong calmly looked back and asked, how is it? Wang Xingxiao didn't speak, but just reached out his hand. A dazzling electric light bloomed in his hand, and there was a faint thunder in the air. Wang Tianzong narrowed his eyes and nodded. Let's go. There's one more thing to do. After that, we'll go to Huading. Your sister found a very good young man with wind and thunder veins like you. I want to meet him. Is that the brother who saved Yuedong's life? You should thank him. Wang Xingxiao laughed, and his tone was calm and confident. Wang Tianzong nodded and glanced at Fireman's back again, expressionless. Let's go. He turned around and left directly. Dad, where are we going now? Kunlun City. The figures of the father and son gradually disappeared. Fireman, who had never looked back, also came to the gate of the prison. The gate of the prison was made entirely of alloy, with a password, which looked extremely complicated. The prison guard entered 5 passwords in a row. After the 5th door was opened, a closed space appeared in front of Fireman. Fireman stepped in without hesitation. The space in the closed prison was narrow, and one road after another appeared in front of Fireman. It was a dazzling maze just by looking at the exit. Turn left. Fireman walked slowly. There was blood flowing down the corner of his mouth, and he reached out to wipe it away. He lowered his head and walked forward with his mouth tightly closed, and his eyes were cold. Outside the prison, he told Wang Tianzong the truth. He had a clear conscience in this battle. But what Wang Tianzong didn't know was that as early as 2 years ago, the strongest fire-flaming realm expert in his heart had been injured in another fierce battle, and the injury had not yet healed. At that time, his opponent was a youth who was only 17 years old, a youth who was worthy of him putting his life on the line and everything he had to test. That battle also took place outside the maze. There was also only one bystander. The two fought fiercely for nearly 16 hours. Fireman was as steady as Mount Tai, but the boy broke through the fire-flaming realm and entered the thunder-shocking realm uncontrollably at the last minute. The boy won that battle. But fire-flaming realm against fire-flaming realm. The boy lost. For those who practiced the invincible manual, the outcome was so obvious and so cruel. On that day, Fireman clearly remembered that he stood in front of him, with his hands open and a bright smile. Fire and lightning kept rushing out of his body, burning and blooming. His realm retreated from the thunder-shocking realm to the fire-flaming realm, the ice-condensing realm, and the chi-controlling realm. In the large light and shadow, his smile was bright and firm, but he said lightly, "It's just starting over." In that brilliant and lonely light and shadow, the strongest young heavenly sun Fireman had seen so far destroyed his martial arts and started over. "It's just starting over." Fireman wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and his eyes were warm. Thank you for the monthly votes of a game of spring and autumn. If you have monthly votes, please give them to Special Warfare. Today's update of more than 9,000 words. Chapter 73. With tens of millions of square kilometers of land, Zhongzhou State was rich in resources and talented people. From an international point of view, everyone has a different view of the continent. Politically and militarily, Zhongzhou State was the most powerful country in the world. From the perspective of ordinary people, Zhongzhou State was the most mysterious and charming country in the East. In the eyes of the experts in the dark world, the vast Zhongzhou State, to put it bluntly, could be divided into 9 words. West Kunlun, North Taibai, Southeast City. In the hearts of the experts in the dark world, they were the 3 most powerful forces in Zhongzhou State. Kunlun City of Kunlun Mountain, Sai City of Taibai Mountain, and the border Praetorian Corps of Zhongzhou State. This was the backbone of Zhongzhou State's defense for the past 2 decades. It had been deeply rooted in Zhongzhou State for many years and was as stable as a rock. Other than the 3 superpowers, there was the Wang family of Beihai. This was a very special wealthy family in the world. For hundreds of years, both the Zhongzhou state government and the Wang family of Beihai had emphasized that Beihai province was a part of Zhongzhou state. But the fact was that very few people in the world thought that the Wang family of Beihai belonged to Zhongzhou state. This was a very strange phenomenon. The 160,000 square kilometers of Beihai province, from officials to military officers, were all appointed by the Wang family of Beihai. Even the top leader of Beihai province was selected by the Wang family of Beihai and then recommended to the decision-making committee. Among more than 30 provinces in Zhongzhou state, only Beihai province had such treatment. Even the residents of Beihai province would say that they were from Beihai instead of Zhongzhou state or Beihai of Zhongzhou state when they went out to places all over the world. This kind of strong sense of regional belonging was not uncommon at the provincial level. For example, most people from Guinness Island would say that they were from Guinness Island instead of Dongshan Island, and people from Gusu Island would say that they were from Gusu instead of Wuyue Island. But at the national level, in the entire Zhongzhou state, only people from Beihai province would say that they were from Beihai when they traveled around the world. This was the case even under normal circumstances. In the Dark World, the experts would naturally separate the Wang family of Beihai from Zhongzhou State. It seemed that only in this way, when the experts of Zhongzhou State were mentioned, the foreign experts of the Dark World would not feel so much pressure. Looking at the overall situation of the Dark World, the most memorable ones were the masters on the Divine and Holy lists. The status of the God list could be said to be supreme. The Holy list was second only to the Divine list. There were a total of 30 people on the two lists, and they were the top big shots in the entire Dark World. If Wang Tianzong of the Wang family of Beihai was added, 3 of the 4 invincible realm experts in Zhongzhou State were on the list, and all of them were on the Divine list. The pressure was self-evident. If Wang Tianzong was excluded and the experts of Zhongzhou State were still extremely powerful, at least they would not make people feel desperate. On the same morning, when Wang Tianzong of the Wang family of Beihai went to Kunlun City, Flaming Fire, one of the 12 super masters of Samsara, also came to the top of Mount Taibai. The peak, which was nearly 3,000 meters high, was snow-white, magnificent and magnificent. Standing on the peak and overlooking the surroundings, one could see mountains covered in snow all year round. The white was quiet and peaceful, like a fairy tale kingdom, free of dirt and dust. It is indeed beautiful. It's even more beautiful than our headquarters. I just don't know what the future holds. Flaming Fire looked at the pure white snow and sighed softly. Are you thinking of your tribe again? A black figure stood beside Flaming Fire. He was slender and thin, and his whole body was shrouded in a large cloak. The hood of the cloak covered his face, making it impossible to see what he looked like. He stood quietly beside Flaming Fire, with a long sword on his back. When he did not speak, he was like a strange shadow, without any aura at all. But as he spoke, his whole body seemed to suddenly come to life, and there was suddenly a trace of extremely sharp sword intent all over him. His tone was soft and slow, but every word was like the sound of a long sword, showing off its sharpness. That's not a tribe. Flaming Fire's eyes were in a trance, but her tone was extremely calm. Standing in this place, it was indeed easy for her to think of the place she called home before she met the palace master. There was also dreamy white snow, a waterfall flowing down, and a cold pool that never froze all year round. But there was no laughter. That place was silent, solemn, and rigid, like a fake landscape painting. The deathly stillness was devoid of any vitality, unlike here. Even in this world of ice and snow, it was still full of vitality. The black figure chuckled, and the sword intent echoed around him. He reached out and pointed forward, saying slowly, "There are about 2 kilometers left. Just go straight." Flaming Fire nodded and stepped forward. She had just taken a step. A warm voice with a hint of a smile suddenly rang out. It was calm and gentle, sounding refined and courteous. "There is a forbidden area ahead. What are you doing here?" Flaming Fire stopped and raised her head. A snow-white figure stood quietly on a small snowy hill a few dozen meters in front of him. He had white hair and white clothes, and he wore a silver-white mask. It was as if he had blended in perfectly with the snowy ground. He stood motionless, as if he had been standing here for a long time, but also as if he had just appeared. At this moment, he seemed to have become a part of the wind and snow on the mountain. He was everywhere, but nowhere to be found. Flaming Fire's pupils contracted slightly, and for a moment, she felt that she could not lock on the figure in front of her. If they were fighting, she would not even have the chance to take the initiative to attack. The other party had completely integrated with the surrounding environment. Once he attacked, it would definitely be a matter of life and death. This was the fighting state of a top assassin. He did not move, but he would kill with one blow. Although the white figure opposite her spoke in a gentle tone, he was obviously ready to fight. Ahem. The black figure beside Flaming Fire suddenly coughed softly. In an instant, the dense sword intent broke out on the peak of Mount Taibai. The wind and snow were turbulent, the sword intent was like a dragon, and the sword energy was like a rainbow. In front of Flaming Fire, the seemingly real Snow White was broken like a mirror in the sword energy. The snow was still snow, and the white figure was still white. Everything became clear again. We are not enemies. Who are you? Before the white figure was about to attack, Flaming Fire took the initiative to speak. The white figure surrounded by wind and snow stared at the darkness in his sight. His eyes were solemn, but the smile on his face did not diminish. I'm Drifting Cloud from Sai City. How should I address you? Breeze. Drifting Cloud. They were the strongest assassin combination in Zhongzhou State. Both of them had the strength at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. They were known as the double walls of Sai City. Below the city lord, their individual strength might not be the strongest, but once they joined forces, they had the capital to be fearless. In the entire Sai City and even in the killer world, they were the real big shots. Flaming Fire nodded solemnly. Samsara, Flaming Fire. Drifting Cloud was slightly stunned. Before he could speak, the black figure continued, Samsara, Saint. Drifting Cloud's expression suddenly became solemn. Saint and Flaming Fire. Although they were both among the 12 super masters of Samsara, their status was absolutely different. There was no doubt about Flaming Fire's strength and status. But among the 12 super masters, Saint was the first super master. His mysteriousness was second only to the Palace Lord, and even his strength was the same. Since such a figure visited Sai City had to treat him with caution. Especially in the case that Sai City and Samsara Palace had no interaction before, the two super masters of Samsara Palace suddenly came here. What was their purpose? What can I do for you? Drifting Cloud's expression was solemn, but there was doubt in his tone. We have a letter, and we hope to hand it to Her Highness Hidden God in person. Flaming Fire said straightforwardly. A letter from Her Highness Palace Lord? Drifting Cloud asked attentively, and his tone became more and more solemn. The master of Samsara Palace was a mysterious figure in the whole dark world. Drifting Cloud did not think that she could have any interaction with his city lord. Thinking of everything that she had done in Billy's state recently, Drifting Cloud seemed to have some speculations in his heart. Flaming Fire remained silent, showing an attitude of no comment. Drifting Cloud narrowed his eyes, adjusted the earphones around his ears, and whispered something. Then he said to Saint and Flaming Fire, please. No matter what the two super masters of Samsara came here for, they were guests, and it was always inappropriate to keep them out. The three of them walked all the way in the snow. About 2 kilometers later, a vast hall covered with snow appeared in front of the three of them. The hall was magnificent, and the buildings, which imitated the style of ancient palaces, stretched out unevenly, looking elegant and solemn against the white snow. A small number of flowers and plants were planted in front of each palace, most of which Flaming Fire could not even name. The brightly colored flowers and plants took root in the snow, making the snow whiter and the flowers more beautiful. The world of ice and snow had its own style. Flaming Fire, who came to Sai City for the first time, looked calm. But looking at the palace in front of her and the snow in front of her, there was an indescribable shock in her heart. It was not obvious, but it did exist. She subconsciously glanced at Saint beside her. Saint was wrapped in a black cloak. He was calm, like a shadow floating beside her, and did not say a word. Flaming Fire shook her head slightly, took a deep breath, and followed Drifting Cloud all the way into the main hall of Sai City. The main hall was called Changbai, which complemented the Changbai Peak in the Taibai mountain range. The interior decoration was simple, and the space was large. 8 thick pillars carved with vivid patterns supported the roof. Under the extremely high ceiling, everyone inside felt extremely small. Inside the main hall, there were 2 rows of soft leather sofas arranged vertically. At the end of the sofas, there were several steps. Above the steps, there was a long soft cushion, which was obviously higher than the sofas below. A languid female figure leaned on the soft cushion behind, looking at Saint and Flaming Fire, who walked into the main hall with clear and indifferent eyes. Her figure was plump and soft, and she wore a loose robe. A golden mask covered most of her face, revealing only her sharp chin and beautiful lips. The woman's clear and indifferent eyes flashed, and she did not say a word. The sofas in the main hall were almost full of people. Roughly counting, there were about 30 of them. Each of them was dressed in snow white, with a mark of a golden mask embroidered on their chests. The mark was the size of a strawberry, shining magnificently in the soft light. Flaming Fire glanced around, keeping her composure. This was the Changbai Parliament of Sai City in Taibai Mountain, as well as the decision-making body of Sai City. In Sai City, Situ Tsangyue, the governor, had the highest decision-making and leadership power. But most of the time, she rarely took charge of things and even did not show up. Every day, she just accompanied the ice and snow of Changbai Peak and cultivated martial arts. In the case of Situ Tsangyue's silence, the 29 members of the Changbai Parliament were responsible for the daily operation of Sai City. In Sai City, which had less than 1,000 people, the 29 members could be said to be the real core of Sai City. The assassins of Sai City, the patriarchs of several wealthy families in the north, and the leaders of the special warfare system were all gathered together, and they controlled the highest voice of the special warfare system in the 3 provinces in the northeast of Zhongzhou state. Flaming Fire quietly looked at Situ Tsangyue on the soft couch. In that beautiful and lazy figure, she could only see endless confusion and loneliness. Among all the special warfare organizations in Zhongzhou state, Sai City could be said to be the most aloof one. For many years, they had stayed on the top of Taibai Mountain and controlled the overall situation of the special warfare in the northeast of Zhongzhou state. They did not expand, but they did not allow anyone to intervene. When something happened outside the northeast of Zhongzhou state, Sai City never took the initiative. Only when the high-level officials of Zhongzhou state made a clear request would they take action at once. After solving the problem, they did not ask for anything, but returned as soon as possible and continued to guard Taibai Mountain. As one of the special warfare giants of Zhongzhou state, the style of the whole Sai City was eccentric. They had no goals, no direction, and no desire, so that they were somewhat aloof from the government of Zhongzhou state. It was precisely because Sai City's aloof and desireless state was in line with the interests of many people that the high-level officials of Zhongzhou state decided to hand over Setting Sun, one of the 12 murderous weapons, to Sai City instead of Kunlun City. She was in the invincible realm, controlled Setting Sun, ranked on the divine list, and owned Sai City. Situ Tsangyue, the hidden god of Zhongzhou state, had too many things. But such a hidden god gave Flaming Fire the feeling that she was really at a loss, so much so that she did not know what to do. That was a very numb and even a little dull attitude towards life. She was passive and decadent, muddling along. Flaming Fire was puzzled, but she was still polite on the surface. She even bowed slightly and said calmly, "Greetings, Your Highness Hidden God. Why are you here, Supermaster?" Situ Tsangyue, dressed in white, leaned lazily on the soft couch high above the main hall. Her tone was indifferent. "Here's a letter for Your Highness to read." Flaming Fire reached into her arms and took out an envelope. Situ Tsangyue waved her hand slightly. The air in front of Flaming Fire fluctuated. The weightless envelope in her hands suddenly rushed directly to Situ Tsangyue's tender white hand like a meteor. Flaming Fire's expression did not change. She stood there and waited. On the soft couch, Situ Tsangyue had opened the envelope and pulled out a page. The paper was obviously torn from a notebook, and it looked very irregular. There were only 11 words written on the pure white paper. The handwriting was delicate and elegant, and it was awe-inspiring. Desperate chase. 9 heavens bearing the wind. Li Tianlan. Situ Tsangyue's eyes flashed and she suddenly stood up. The paper in her hand turned into dust in an instant, fluttering in the air. Situ Tsangyue's eyes shone brightly like never before. With her action, all the members of the Changbai Parliament were completely focused. "Where is he?" Situ Tsangyue stared at Flaming Fire and asked. "Sky Academy." Flaming Fire said lightly. "What's the relationship between him and the Palace Master? Is the Palace Master in Zhongzhou state now?" Situ Tsangyue continued to ask. At this moment, she seemed to have found her goal and direction. The powerful aura belonging to an invincible realm expert bloomed unscrupulously, grand and dazzling. The palace master is still in Billy state. My boss asked me to bring this letter to your highness. Flaming Fire told the truth in an old-fashioned tone. Boss? Situ Tsangyue raised her eyebrows slightly and felt a little puzzled. Yes, my boss. But this matter can represent the will of the palace master. I see. Situ Tsangyue sat back on the soft couch and looked at the scraps of paper still floating in the air thoughtfully. The scraps of paper in the air finally fell to the ground. Are you Saint? Situ Tsangyue's eyes flashed, and her gaze suddenly fell on the black shadow beside Flaming Fire. Take off your cloak. Everyone in the main hall was shaken. If they could see the face of the most mysterious first super master in Samsara, no one would want to miss it. Why don't you take off your mask? Saint was motionless. His tone was indifferent and fearless. Situ Tsangyue's bright and condensed eyes narrowed slightly and she snorted coldly. In the quiet hall, there was a sudden wind. It rushed straight to Saint's face. Saint took a step forward, reached out, and held the sword. The long sword on his back was suddenly unsheathed. There was a clanging sound between heaven and earth. In the hall, the swords of several experts rushed out of the sheath at the same time. The fierce clanging sound rushed out of the hall and echoed in the mountains. At the same time, it roared in everyone's heart. The sword intent was surging and growing endlessly. A smile gradually appeared in Situ Tsangyue's eyes. She whispered, "It's you." For a moment just now, she even suspected that this saint was the mysterious master of Samsara Palace. Now her guess was wrong, but it was not a loss to know the true identity of Saint. Saint loosened his hand holding the sword, and the clanging sound disappeared. He said calmly, "This sword is the sincerity of Samsara. Goodbye." He turned around and walked out of the hall. Flaming Fire followed him without saying a word. Outside the hall, the wind and snow were howling endlessly. In the hall, Situ Tsangyue looked at their backs silently and suddenly said, "Wait." She got up again. The whole hall fell into absolute silence in an instant. Situ Tsangyue's figure had rushed out of the hall. The endless wind and snow suddenly stopped. Only her figure moved forward in the white. Countless lifelike shadows drew a straight line behind her. The air was shaking violently, but there was silence between heaven and earth. Everything happened in an instant. Situ Tsangyue seemed to take only one step, but it also seemed to take many steps. When the shadows dissipated, she was already standing in front of Saint. Saint was motionless and even lowered his head, as if he was in deep thought. The indifference in Situ Tsangyue's eyes faded, and her eyes were gentle. She chuckled and said, "Samsara used your identity as a sincerity, and I used my martial arts as a sincerity. Did you see it clearly just now?" "Thank you." Saint was silent for a long time. Then he bowed slightly and said in a dignified tone, "I owe you a favor." Only he knew what that moment meant to him. That was the real desperate chase. It was Situ Tsangyue's body movement in the invincible realm. All the essence of this body movement seemed to be vividly displayed at that moment. For people like Saint, who had stepped into the half-step invincible realm and was only one step away from the real invincible realm, that moment was like a bright light in the dark, and its importance was self-evident. "We're on the same side. Why are you so polite?" Situ Tsangyue smiled indifferently. She glanced at Flaming Fire and continued, "Tell your boss that I will send someone to Sai City." "Is it drifting cloud? Or breeze?" Flaming Fire asked subconsciously. Judging from Situ Tsangyue's attitude, she could be sure that the person she sent to the Sky Academy this time was an absolute big shot in Sai City. The leader of the assassination course group of the Sky Academy seemed to be settled. Breeze? Drifting cloud? No matter which one of them went, it could be said that it was condescending to go there. "It's neither." Situ Tsangyue turned around and said calmly, "It's tribulation." Not only Flaming Fire, but even Saint was shocked and his face changed dramatically. Tribulation. The only deputy governor of Sai City. The strongest chi-controlling realm expert. The lunatic who tried to enter the invincible realm in the chi-controlling realm half a year ago. He could be said to be the only lunatic in Sai City whose reputation was comparable to Situtsang. The Lord of Shadow in the Dark World. The #1 assassin in Zhongzhou State. Tribulation was not on the list of the top 10 contemporary experts in Zhongzhou State. But if Tribulation was determined to assassinate, all of the top 10 experts would be doomed except for the first 3. Saint took a deep breath and looked at Situtsang, who was already standing under the Changbai Palace. He said with a smile, "She is really a great god. Zhuang Huayang will have a headache." Under the Changbai Palace, Situtsang did not look at the two leaving figures. She just looked up at the plaque hanging high in front of the palace and was lost in thought. Many years ago, the traitor who made Zhongzhou State suffer heavy losses and the man who made her life a success had personally inscribed 2 words on this plaque, Changbai. They knew each other until their hair turned white. But for many years, the hidden god of Zhongzhou State, who had been feared by countless people, had always been alone, unattached and had no one to rely on. Situtsang looked up at the plaque. Her expression was soft and her eyes were sad. "Changbai, Changbai, if you are not here, who will I know in my life? For whom will I turn white?" The chapter of nearly 6,000 words was posted late. Thank you, Yuan Yang, for the monthly ticket of Bodhi Fantasy Land. Chapter 74. Different from Sai City, which stood aloof from worldly affairs, as the power center of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State, Kunlun City paid attention to a majestic atmosphere in terms of scale and aura. It was also a city built in a world of ice and snow. The vast palaces of Sai City were the most conspicuous buildings. And Kunlun City was a real city. Kunlun City was located on the west side of the Kunlun mountain range, covering an area of dozens of square kilometers. It was built between Qingyun Peak and Linggu Peak, nearly 4,000 meters above sea level. It was covered with snow all year round, but the scenery was not monotonous and the climate was not cold. It snowed all year round, the climate was pleasant, and the flowers were blooming all year round. The scenery was picturesque. This was Kunlun City, the most peculiar place in the entire Zhongzhou State. The sun was setting. When the sun was about to set, on the road on the east side of Qingyun Peak, 2 figures walked slowly in the overwhelming snow. A young man and a middle-aged man walked side by side. Looking from a distance, they were like 2 black spots in the snow. If one did not pay attention, one would easily ignore them. The young man's footsteps were steady and powerful, and he walked very fast. He walked in the snow that almost reached his knees as if he were walking on flat ground. His movements were natural. Every step he took had a feeling that his body was stretched to the extreme, as if it was made by nature. Not to mention his physical condition, at least people would feel comfortable at first glance. The middle-aged man followed him casually, neither hurriedly nor slowly, but always kept walking side by side with the young man. The snow in the valley was blowing with the wind, and it was cold. The middle-aged man in unlined clothes looked up at the seemingly endless snow in his sight, looking calm. "Xing Shao, can you hold on?" He glanced at the young man beside him and said in a steady tone. Wang Tianzong had just broken through and was seriously injured. He came to the snow mountain from the desert in one day. Even if he knew that his son was talented, he seemed to be a little worried. "I'm fine," Wang Xingshao said with a smile, and every expression showed joy from the bottom of his heart. As the top wealthy family in the world, the Wang family of Beihai was too big, and Wang Tianzong was too busy. Among the young people of the Wang family of Beihai, he could be said to be the one who spent the longest time with his father, but the longest time was actually very short. Ever since he was young, his invincible father had always been silent and quiet, like a mountain peak that everyone could only look up to. This time, from the ocean to the grassland, to the desert, and then to the snowy mountains, the father and son had been together day and night. It seemed that only at this time could he feel that his father's heart was very close to him, very close. He was no longer a young prodigy that others admired and valued. His father was no longer the invincible #1 on the divine list and the leader of a wealthy family. It was simple and natural. Wang Xingxiao enjoyed such a journey from the bottom of his heart. No matter how hard and tired it was, he didn't mind. Then hurry up. Wang Tianzong nodded and said in a calm tone. Wang Xingxiao agreed. His pace became more rapid, and his body became more and more stretched. His every move was full of spiritual qi, revealing an almost flawless martial arts aura. Wang Tianzong still walked forward unhurriedly, but no matter how fast Wang Xingxiao walked, he could always walk side by side with him. In a trance, he didn't seem to be moving forward, but just standing there quietly. The snow under his feet and the snow-capped peak in front of him were retreating rapidly according to his will. The invincible realm expert who ranked first on the divine list seemed to have returned to nature, but no matter where he stood, he seemed to be the center of the whole world. The snow under his feet was getting shallower and shallower. A tall stone tablet appeared in the snow. The black stone tablet was 10 meters high and 3 or 4 meters wide, heavy and heavy. A few bright red words were engraved on the stone tablet. In the white snow, the black and red color looked extremely strange and dazzling. In the military forbidden area ahead, idlers stopped. The handwriting was wild and sharp, and every stroke showed a kind of sharpness and elegance that seemed to be flying out. Wang Tianzong stood in front of the stone tablet, staring at the handwriting on it, and said softly, "The military forbidden area." "Well, the military forbidden area." He shook his head, continued to move forward, and said calmly, "It's an eyesore." Wang Xingxiao had already taken out the heavy and broad sword behind him. A dazzling electric light lingered in his blade. Wang Xingxiao held the sword and chopped down. The blade rubbed against the stone tablet, and the flashing sparks flashed from top to bottom. Wang Xingxiao turned around and continued to move forward. There was a loud bang behind him. The stone tablet, which was 10 meters high, collapsed into countless pieces in an instant. Large pieces of stone flew and eventually sank into the snow. "Dad, are you sure that Kunlun City sent someone to attack Yuetong?" Wang Xingxiao, who had smashed the stone tablet, followed Wang Tianzong and asked softly. "I can only be sure that it was not done by Gu Xingyun." Gu Xingyun, the god of war of Zhongzhou State, the governor of Kunlun City, was also the top leader of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State. Of course, he had heard about the attack on his sister in Huading. If it was not done by Gu Xingyun, what did it have to do with Kunlun City? A good-for-nothing who can't even hang at the bottom of the holy list wants to rise to the top with a little cleverness. Idiot, it's ridiculous. Wang Tianzong twitched the corner of his mouth and said coldly, "Since they want me to come to Kunlun City so much, I'll come and have a look. If I don't follow their wishes, how can I catch their tail?" Wang Xingxiao was silent and thoughtful. He knew very well who couldn't hang at the bottom of the holy list. Gu Qianchuan, the first elder of Kunlun City. Wang Tianzong could say that he was a good-for-nothing, but he was not qualified to say anything. He was known as a young heavenly son and had entered the thunder-shocking realm, but any invincible realm master still needed to be looked up to by him. Gu Qianchuan. He frowned and muttered to himself. In general, Kunlun City was generally harmonious. But according to his father, it seemed that Gu Qianchuan united with outsiders to seize power, and the attack on Yuetong was just one of the steps. When did the fight inside Kunlun City become so fierce? Wang Xingxiao couldn't believe it. Gu Xingyun was so powerful that it was almost impossible for him to control the situation in Kunlun City. Just like the current Wang family of Beihai, there were conflicts and contradictions among the major branches and lineal descendants, but everything was under control. But Kunlun City, how long had it been rising? It had only been 20 years, and the internal contradictions were so fierce. How could it be possible? Wang Tianzong stopped talking. The snow under their feet became lighter and lighter. They could even see some plants and flowers, which were delicate and lovable against the white snow. "Is this close to the dragon vein?" Wang Xingxiao whispered. Kunlun City was windy and snowy all the year round, but the flowers were blooming, and the city was as warm as spring. All of this was because of the dragon vein under Kunlun City. Wang Xingxiao had heard some rumors. It was said that the dragon vein would move on its own, but the time and direction of movement were uncertain. The dragon vein of Kunlun City had existed as early as 50 years ago. What was more rare was that there were two rare earth veins where the dragon vein was located. It was the pattern of two dragons playing with a pearl. Because of this, the dragon vein stayed here for a longer time. But under normal circumstances, the dragon vein should have moved to another place 15 years ago, but it was locked here by Xian Xuanzi, the eccentric of Taoism. This lock lasted for 20 years, and it was also the beginning of Xian Xuanzi's fame. Since then, people really regarded him as a metaphysics grandmaster who was as famous as Great Master Wu Wei. The flowers were blooming here, and the temperature was gradually rising. It could be seen that they were not far from the Dragon Vein and Kunlun City. It's in front. Wang Tianzong's face was calm, but his tone was a little complicated. He whispered, "When I was a child, I learned swordsmanship here. There was no Kunlun City at that time. It was just a few thatched cottages. Things remain the same, but people have changed." He laughed at himself and whispered again, "Things remain the same, but people have changed." Wang Xingxiao was silent. When his father was a child, at that time, there was no Kunlun City in Zhongzhou State. There was only the war god family and the Li family. People said that where the Li family was, there must be a dragon vein. But in fact, where the dragon vein was, there must be a Li family. It was self-evident who his father had learned swordsmanship from. "Let's go." Wang Tianzong continued to move forward and looked up. Through the howling wind and snow. At the end of his sight, the outline of a city had gradually become clear from blurred. The setting sun on the horizon was trying its best to burn the last of its afterglow. The sky that was vaguely covered by the snow-capped peaks was a fiery red. The brilliant light sprinkled on the snow-capped ground, giving off an orange-yellow color. In his line of sight, the blizzard city between the two snow-capped peaks seemed to be glowing, revealing a kind of grand magnificence and majesty. The temperature in Wang Xingxiao's eyes gradually decreased, and he slightly sped up his pace. The retro city walls and city towers were getting closer and closer. Wang Xingxiao could even see the two teams of soldiers standing outside the city gate who were in charge of guarding. The soldiers were lined up neatly, with serious and indifferent faces and loaded guns. They were guarding the city in the icy and snowy environment. Such a military appearance could be said to have high morale. Wang Xingxiao gently moved his body, and the snowflakes and dampness all over his body disappeared in an instant. "Stop!" At the city gate, some soldiers finally noticed the two travelers who were walking in the wind and snow. Everyone's body tightened almost instinctively, and the guns in their hands were slightly tightened. Although the muzzles were not pointed at Wang Tianzong and Wang Xingxiao, the solemn killing intent had begun to brew. "What are you doing? This is Kunlun City. It's the forbidden area of Zhongzhou State. Don't you see the stone tablet?" The two teams of soldiers rushed over neatly, and a captain with the rank of captain shouted angrily. "Your stone tablet is of poor quality, and I broke it." Wang Tianzong glanced at him and said in a cold tone, "How dare you?" The captain sneered, but before he went on, he saw Wang Tianzong's eyes sweep over. His eyes were not so fierce or domineering, but ordinary. But under this glance, the captain suddenly lost all his courage. He opened his mouth, but could not make any sound for a while. "Who the hell are you?" The captain's heart beat wildly for no reason. He took a deep breath and asked in a deep voice. Wang Tianzong did not speak, but looked up at the city tower above the city gate silently. Wang Xingxiao, who was carrying a huge sword, also said nothing. In the wind and snow, outside the city gate, the atmosphere suddenly became oppressive and cold. "You can't enter the city." A drop of cold sweat flowed down the captain's forehead. He was loyal to his duty. Although his voice was dry, he still insisted to say, "If you want to enter the city, I have to report." "I won't enter the city." Wang Tianzong finally said slowly, "This so-called city is too small. I just come to have a look, and let you have a look by the way." "Look at what?" The captain was stunned and said subconsciously. "Look at the sword." Wang Tianzong said softly. With his voice, the sky above the entire Kunlun city suddenly twisted violently. The sword intent, which was so grand that it almost filled the whole world, gathered. The afterglow of the setting sun was still dim. But the sky above Kunlun city had changed. At this moment, almost everyone in Kunlun city went out of their homes and looked up at the sky. The temperature outside the city was dropping rapidly. In everyone's horrified eyes, a huge sword with a length of thousands of meters and a width of hundreds of meters had been completely formed. The sky above the city was still changing. The air was compressed. The incredible sword, which was almost beyond everyone's imagination, became more and more solid, like ice crystals. The huge sword crossed the sky and turned slightly. The sword energy was in Jiuzhou. The wind and clouds surged, and the whole city seemed to be shaking slightly. "Gu Qianchuan, come out to see me." Wang Tianzong spoke slowly, but his voice shook the sky. His calm and cold voice rang in the ears of everyone in Kunlun city. Everyone's heart was filled with despair. "Stop!" A frightened shout rang out. A skinny figure dashed out of the city gate at lightning speed. Wang Tianzong glanced at him, expressionless. When the skinny figure rushed out of the city gate saw Wang Tianzong, his expression changed wildly. His original anger had completely disappeared, leaving only fear. His voice trembled and was almost out of shape, but he still persisted and asked, "Your Majesty." "What? What does this mean?" "Your Majesty." In the dark world, every invincible realm expert could be called His Highness, which was people's respect for invincible realm experts. But the word, "Your Majesty," was unique. It only belonged to the Wang family of Beihai and the Sword Emperor of Zhongzhou State. "How dare you talk to me?" Wang Tianzong looked at the skinny figure in front of him and said calmly, "Where is Gu Qianchuan?" "First Elder just left for Huading," the skinny old man said in a trembling voice. His code name was Skeleton, and he was a famous expert in Zhongzhou State. But in front of Wang Tianzong, he didn't even have the courage to speak loudly. Wang Tianzong frowned slightly and moved. The next second, he appeared on the city gate tower. The giant sword in the air trembled slightly, and the majestic sword intent poured out crazily. The whole Kunlun city was filled with cold sword energy. "Your Majesty, please be merciful." "Why on earth?" Skeleton was scared out of his wits. He stood at the foot of the city and howled in despair. "Why?" Wang Tianzong smiled and said softly, "Nothing. I just don't like you." He paused and then said, "Kneel down." The whole city was dead silent. No one knelt down, and no one dared to move. Wang Tianzong narrowed his eyes slightly. The giant sword in the sky shook violently and turned over instantly. Boom! Under Wang Tianzong, the city gate tower collapsed instantly. The 1,000-meter-long giant sword stood upright and rotated in the air, pointing straight at the ground. Wang Tianzong's body was suspended in the air, expressionless, like a god, ruling the world. The skeleton's face was full of fear. He bent his waist, bent his knees, and unconsciously knelt on the ground. His face was blood red, but his knees did not move. He lowered his head and said, "Your Majesty, please forgive me." As he knelt down, all the soldiers in front of the city gate finally knelt down. Then it was in the city. One after another. On this day, under the Sword Emperor's giant sword, the whole Kunlun city knelt down. None of the tens of thousands of elites in the city had pride. Wang Tianzong stood in the air and looked at the people of Kunlun city kneeling all over the city. He narrowed his eyes and whispered to himself, "This is the posture you should have." His figure flashed, and the next second, he had carried Wang Xingxiao away. In the wind and snow, the figures of the father and son were getting smaller and smaller, and finally became two black spots. The wind and snow filled Kunlun City. After a long time, the first skeleton who knelt down finally raised his head. At the same time, the 1,000-meter-long giant sword that had not dissipated above fell straight down. No! Skeleton's eyes turned red in an instant. Boom! The condensed giant sword fell to the ground in an instant, and the whole city shook violently. The city wall, the city gate, and countless buildings cracked and collapsed one after another, like a landslide and the sky falling. One sword destroyed the city. Chapter 75. Old Master Dongqing asked Li Tianlan to live in Dongqing Rushi's place, but in fact, it was Dongqing Wudi's. The Dongqing clan, which occupied the mountain as the king, was extraordinary. But in fact, there were only 6 villas on the big mountain. To put it bluntly, there were 6 families. These 6 families supported the most important branches of the Dongqing clan. No matter from which angle, there was a kind of prosperity, like a towering tree, unattainable. Dongqing Wudi's villa was close to the top of the mountain. In terms of height, it was second only to Old Master Dongqing's main villa, and the size was basically the same. Li Tianlan didn't feel anything at first, but when Dongqing Chuchi took him into a very large bedroom on the 3rd floor and smelled the fresh and elegant fragrance inside, he finally felt something was wrong. Sure enough, Dongqing Chuchi told him clearly that this was Dongqing Rushi's bedroom and that it was the old master's idea. Li Tianlan was really in a dilemma. At the same time, he couldn't figure out why the old master was so anxious. Looking at his posture, it seemed that he couldn't wait to put Dongqing Rushi in his bed immediately. He was so anxious that Li Tianlan even felt a little absurd. If the Li family was still at its peak, Li Tianlan could understand what the Dongqing clan did, even though it was beneath their dignity. After all, with the status of the Li family at that time, many rich and powerful families would like to be tied to the Li family and use their granddaughters as bargaining chips. Many people would do such a thing. But now it was different. The Li family had long been in decline. Although Li Tianlan had entered the secular world, in the face of the extremely complicated situation in Zhongzhou state, no one dared to say that the Li family had a chance to rise. No one was even sure whether Li Tianlan could grow up. Under normal circumstances, at this time, even if the Dongqing clan would not deny it to deal with him, they would at least quickly cut off relations with him and let the marriage contract be invalid. If there was really such a situation, Li Tianlan could completely understand it and he would not resent anything. Every man for himself would be destroyed by heaven and earth. His identity was a bomb. If he got involved with it, he might face endless hostility. What kind of behemoths were the Prince Group and Kunlun City? How deep-rooted was the Wang family of Beihai? Even if these were not mentioned, which of the family members of the 120,000 soldiers who were wiped out at the border with their father's treason did not hate the Li family to the bone? Now that so many years had passed, no one could be sure where some of the outstanding family members were. Once his identity was exposed, there would be countless opponents in the open and in the dark. No matter how strong the Dongqing clan was, they could not cope with it, and even risked being completely torn apart by the general trend. Their refusal to acknowledge the engagement was, at best, a means of self-protection. It had nothing to do with being noble or despicable. Li Tianlan was too lazy to resent anything. He had long been ready to give up the engagement. But when he came to the Dongqing clan, everything was F***king wrong. Not only did the Dongqing clan not intend to break the engagement, but they also couldn't wait for him to marry Dongqing Rushi. The old master's attitude was simply impatient. He directly sent him to Dongqing Rushi's bedroom. Li Tianlan felt helpless but also a little lucky. Fortunately, Dongqing Rushi retreated in advance. Otherwise, the old master would really make an absurd move of letting him sleep with Dongqing Rushi tonight. He had just tasted Qin Weibai, and it was time for him to taste the relationship between a man and a woman. At that time, if he really slept with Dongqing Rushi, it was really hard to say whether Li Tianlan could control himself. Li Tianlan instinctively wanted to change the room, but was refused. After Dongqing Chuchi left, he hesitated and sat on the bed. After calling Qin Weibai, he was in a daze silently. A woman's boudoir should be the type of fresh, romantic, or lovely, but what Li Tianlan could feel here was only coldness and gloom. The light gray walls were full of cold metal texture. The furnishings in the room were simple and monotonous. The bed was big, soft, and comfortable, but from the bedsheet to the bedside table, it was all black, without any pattern, looking old-fashioned and solemn. In front of the window was a simple and generous desk, also in a cold color. Several books were placed neatly on the desk. Only a photo frame on the desk could give people a little warm feeling. It seemed to be a family photo many years ago. Dongqing Wudi was holding two very young daughters, smiling freely. A young woman who looked very kind to Li Tianlan put her arms around Dongqing Wudi's neck from the side, looking very happy. Li Tianlan silently looked at the family photo, his body slowly lying on the bed, his expression calm. The elegant fragrance slowly floated into Li Tianlan's nostrils, filling his sense of smell. Different from Qin Weibai's natural richness, and different from Wang Yuedong's fragrance and freshness, it was a very elegant and quiet smell, leaving a deep impression. Li Tianlan closed his eyes. He was a little sleepy, but he couldn't fall asleep for a while. His mind was full of the Dongqing clan. He always felt that whether it was Dongqing Hanguang, Dongqing Wudi, or even Thunder God, there was something wrong with the way they looked at him this time, but he couldn't tell what was wrong. The Dongqing clan was too warm to him, so warm that it even made him a little uneasy. Dongqing Chuchi was relatively more natural, but that was because she regarded him as her future brother-in-law. Li Tianlan didn't get in touch with other people in the Dongqing clan, but just the few people he had met so far gradually made him feel a little overwhelmed. Kindness. He believed that the Li family's kindness to the Dongqing clan existed, but it was definitely not the main reason why the Dongqing clan was so warm. Any kindness was not enough for the whole Dongqing clan to accept him at the risk of the destruction of the whole clan. If he was just an ordinary person with a declining family, it was understandable that the Dongqing clan was willing to fulfill the engagement because of the kindness of the past. But behind the Li family's loneliness was probably the biggest political storm in Zhongzhou state in the past 2 decades. If he was with Dongqing Rushi, once his identity was exposed, the whole Dongqing clan would become the first target of countless people. Dongqing Hanguang knew this, but even so, he insisted on marrying his granddaughter to him. With such a resolute attitude, if it was only because of the kindness of the past and the engagement, Li Tianlan would believe it even if he was a fool. What was the purpose behind the series of actions of the Dongqing clan? What value did he have that he hadn't discovered yet? The Dongqing clan, which was unbelievably enthusiastic, was it an enemy or a friend? Li Tianlan's imagination ran wild, and he finally fell asleep in a daze. After an unknown period of time, there was a gentle knock on the door, and Dongqing Chuchi's gentle voice sounded outside the door. Tianlan, are you awake? Instead of relaxing because of the enthusiasm of the Dongqing clan, Li Tianlan, who was more vigilant, immediately sat up and answered. He washed his face in the bathroom of the bedroom and opened the door. They're still at Grandpa's. It's just the two of us at noon. I made lunch. Would you like to have some? Dongqing Chuchi stood at the door and said softly with a smile. Li Tianlan nodded and said casually, Sister Chuchi, do you live here too? I just moved out last year, and now I live with my wife on this mountain. The villa at the bottom is my home, Dongqing Chuchi said softly. It could be seen that she had a good relationship with her husband. When she mentioned her husband, she smiled sweetly. What does brother-in-law do? A soldier. Li Tianlan followed Dongqing Chuchi downstairs and asked with a chuckle. He works in Luojing. He's the mayor of Luojing. He's very capable. Uncle Zhou said that the Zhou family will count on him to take over in the future. Dongqing Chuchi's gentle and beautiful eyes glanced at Dongqing Chuchi and said meaningfully, even if it's an alliance marriage, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I have a good relationship with your brother-in-law, right? Li Tianlan was stunned. He knew that she had heard from the old master that he had some resistance to the engagement. Was she here for work? The Zhou family? He knew little about the current six. The Zhou family seemed to be the backbone of the giant group. Together with the Dongqing clan and the Bai family, they formed the three giants of the giant group. All the voices of the giant group were basically made by these three giants. Dongqing Chuqi marrying the heir of the Zhou family was mutually beneficial for both sides. It was also a good ending for Dongqing Chuqi herself. Luojing was one of the sub-provincial cities in Zhongzhou state. It had just been applied for a few years ago. The heir of the Zhou family could become the mayor of Luojing and had a bright future. In contrast, although Dongqing Chuqi was at the same level as her husband, there was no doubt that the eldest son of the Zhou family had a better future. Sister Chuqi, I agree with you. I'm honored and even a little happy that the Dongqing clan thinks highly of me. But I have a girlfriend. I said I would marry her, and I have to do it. Li Tianlan smiled helplessly. Your girlfriend is Little Bai? Dongqing Chuqi suddenly asked. Her tone was playful and a little strange. Li Tianlan suddenly remembered that Qin Weibai had once told him that she was best friends with a core figure of the Dongqing clan. Could it be Dongqing Chuqi? The corner of Li Tianlan's mouth twitched. He nodded and said again, I will marry her. Dongqing Chuqi giggled and walked downstairs quickly. Silly boy, even a married lady like me is tempted by a figure like Little Bai, let alone a man. It's hard to say whether she will marry you or not. Li Tianlan didn't agree with this, but he wouldn't refute it. He went to the dining room and sat down. Looking at the exquisite dishes on the table, he took a bite and said with a smile, it tastes good. Rushi's cooking is much better than mine. If you like it, let her cook for you in the future. Dongqing Chuqi tried hard to promote her sister. Li Tianlan looked a little embarrassed. He ate and didn't say anything. Dongqing Chuqi smiled and stopped talking about this topic. Some things needed to be done slowly. Being too impatient would only be counterproductive. As a senior political official, Dongqing Chuqi had a perfect grasp of the situation. When you were sleeping, I went downtown to buy you clothes. I didn't know what size you would wear, so I bought one for each size. Try it on later. After dinner, the old master said he would take you to the ancestral hall to burn incense. Dongqing Chuqi picked up a mouthful of food and said softly. Li Tianlan subconsciously looked at his clothes. He went out in a hurry almost as soon as he got off Qin Weibai's body last night. As a result, Dongqing Wudi was even more anxious than him. He didn't even give him time to change clothes and directly took him to the Dongqing clan. After traveling thousands of miles, he was still in the moon-white silk pajamas. Li Tianlan didn't realize anything before. Now looking at his clothes again, he suddenly felt like a fool. Thank you. He rubbed his nose and didn't refuse. Not everyone had the courage to parade around in his pajamas. Dongqing Chuqi smiled and didn't speak. Li Tianlan silently lowered his head to eat, but he was thinking about Dongqing Chuqi's words. The old master would take him to the ancestral hall to burn incense? It seemed that he was really determined to pull him into the Dongqing clan. He frowned slightly. He just felt that it was more and more difficult to see the Dongqing clan's meaning. This was an era where everything was covered by countless appearances and grotesqueness. Good and evil, right and wrong, it seemed that everything could be covered with a seemingly beautiful coat. People's hearts were unpredictable. People's hearts were unpredictable. Why was the Dongqing clan so anxious? These days, he was thinking about whether to change the update time. Chapter 76. The ancestral hall of the Dongqing clan was built halfway up the mountain, covering an area of about 1,500 square meters. It was a brick and wood structure with green bricks and green tiles. The 4 words, Dongqing Ancestral Hall, were engraved on the top of the archway, from right to left. The scarlet ink stained the words, which didn't look sad, but had a kind of heroic beauty. A stone drum was placed on the left and right sides of the gate. Every detail of the entire ancestral hall showed a clear sense of simplicity and solemnity. Li Tianlan really didn't want to come before he completely figured out the purpose of the Dongqing clan. But no matter how he thought about it, he couldn't think of a suitable reason to refuse. Li Tianlan was also very clear that Dongqing Hongguang took him to the ancestral hall to offer incense, which meant that he must have regarded him as a close junior or even a grandson-in-law. This was a show of respect. If he refused too directly, it would be a slap in the face. No matter what purpose the Dongqing clan hid under its warm appearance, or whether the Dongqing clan would be an enemy or a friend in the future, it was absolutely not appropriate to fall out with them now. The afternoon was warm and sunny, and the sun was just right. The ancestral hall of the Dongqing clan was surrounded by trees on 3 sides, looking more and more quiet and peaceful. Under the mottled shadow of the trees, Dongqing Wudi and Dongqing Hongguang, who arrived first, stood in a place with their backs to the light. They watched Li Tianlan get off the car with a calm face, but there was joy in their eyes. "Old master." Li Tianlan took the initiative to walk over and greet him. Then he looked at Dongqing Wudi and nodded. "Marshal." Dongqing Wudi nodded with a smile and didn't say anything. The marshal of Zhongzhou state was majestic and cold most of the time, full of killing intent. Only in front of his family would he take off his mask. At present, it seemed that Li Tianlan was the first person to be treated specially. Dongqing Hongguang frowned, glanced at Li Tianlan, and scolded with a smile, "Brat, is it so difficult for you to call me grandpa? Even if my relationship with your grandpa is not as good as his relationship with several sacred guards around him, we are friends of life and death. If you don't call me grandpa now, won't you still have to call me grandpa in the future when you marry Rushi?" Li Tianlan looked embarrassed. He looked at Dongqing Wudi and subconsciously wanted him to help him out. However, Dongqing Wudi didn't stand up for him. Instead, he winked at him and smiled more widely. He touched his nose and was about to speak when Dongqing Hongguang continued, "I've prepared the invitation. How about next month? At the end of next month, it's an auspicious day. Come back then." Rushi has also agreed. "Next month, you can get engaged. Don't worry about the holidays. I'll tell your headmaster." Tough and overbearing, this engagement was like a notice to Li Tianlan. It seemed that there was no room for him to resist at all. Li Tianlan frowned slightly. For the first time since he came to the Dongqing clan, he showed obvious resistance. His tone became heavier and he said coldly, "Old master, I told you that I already have a girlfriend." The smile on Dongqing Hongguang's face froze. Looking at Li Tianlan, whose momentum had changed completely, he frowned and said gloomily, "Qin Weibai is indeed a character, but you are in Zhongzhou state now. She can't give you anything. No matter how strong the palace master of Samsara is, she can't affect you here. If you want to develop abroad, Qin Weibai is your best choice. But in Zhongzhou state, the Dongqing clan is the most suitable for you. And only the Dongqing clan is suitable for you. You're confused. Tianlan, there are some things you should think clearly. Don't be emotional. You're different from others. You have too many things on your back, so much that you can't bear it. You're extraordinarily talented. It's no problem for you to enter the invincible realm when you grow up. But even if you're an invincible realm expert, how can you restore the glory of the Li family alone? The Dongqing clan can give you the help you need without reservation. Don't you know how much help it will give you?" Li Tianlan looked at Dongqing Hongguang expressionlessly and said nothing. These words were extremely harsh, but from another point of view, weren't they sincere? Dongqing Hongguang sighed, shook his head, and continued, "Wudi took over your father's position. It's been 20 years. He should have taken action long ago. Why didn't he? Wasn't he waiting for you? In any case, we can't let the border Praetorian Corps fall into the hands of others. Once he takes action, Lazy can temporarily hold on for a few years, but there's no successor. What should we do after that?" He looked into Li Tianlan's eyes and said blandly, "I know you have a good relationship with Zhuang Huayang. Wudi and the leading cadre of the academics have a very good personal relationship. Do you understand what that means?" Li Tianlan suddenly looked up and raised his eyebrows. As the current ruling group, if he didn't add a specific title to the leading cadre of the academics, then it could only be that person. What did it mean for Dongqing Wudi to have a good relationship with that person, given his identity? Li Tianlan knew too little about the turmoil among the upper echelons of Zhengzhou state, but at least he knew that the academics and the prince group were not on good terms. There would definitely be a fierce game in the process of the replacement of the two ruling groups. Zhuang Huayang had said that the academics had very little say in the special warfare system. In this way, how much say did the academics have in the military, which was closely related to the special warfare system? This was already the third year of the leading cadre's position, and the first term was coming to an end. At such an important moment, he must take the opportunity to expand his influence. If his own people couldn't go up, he could only find allies. Would Dongqing Wudi be the ally that the academics needed? As one of the members of the decision-making committee of Zhengzhou State and in charge of the 550,000 troops of the Border Praetorian Corps, Dongqing Wudi's status in the military could be said to be above tens of thousands of people, only under one person. If the academics regarded him as an ally, it certainly needed not the support of the 550,000 troops of the Border Praetorian Corps, but the dominance of the entire military. If Dongqing Wudi took another step forward, where could he go? It seemed that there was only the position of director of the decision-making committee of Zhengzhou State and the standing minister of the army headquarters. If he was still a member of the decision-making committee, then no matter where he went, it could be said that he would be promoted in public but demoted in private. If he became a director of the decision-making committee and presided over the daily work of the military of Zhengzhou State, only this position could be worthy of him, and it was also what Dongqing Wudi and the Dongqing clan needed most. After Dongqing Wudi left, Thunder God could hold the fort for a few years. According to Dongqing Hanguang, after Thunder God, the Dongqing clan hoped that he could control the 550,000 troops of the Border Praetorian Corps. A few years later, when he reached the thunder-shocking realm, he would indeed be qualified to take the military road, enter the decision-making committee, and become a director from a member of parliament. This road could also restore the glory of the Li family. If he took this road, as long as he grew fast enough and married Dongqing Rushi, he could get the full support of the giant group. At present, the risk of doing so was relatively small. Dongqing Hanguang was not joking when he said that he would use the whole family as a dowry. The alliance between the academics and the Dongqing clan, Zhuang Huayang's support for him, and that generous and loose cozying seemed to be gradually connected. Could it be that the old fox knew that the Dongqing clan had something to do with him from the beginning? Boy, don't let your grandfather down. The Dongqing clan is willing to pave the way for you with all its strength. You just need to go up. Dongqing Hanguang said slowly, and it's natural for a man to have 3 wives and 4 concubines. As long as you treat Rushi well in the future, who will pester you about some private affairs? That's settled. Will you come back at the end of next month? No, Li Tianlan said lightly. He refused directly and decisively. Looking at Dongqing Hanguang's suddenly angry eyes, he smiled and said frankly, I don't want to let Grandpa down, but I don't want to let myself down. Old master, I don't need 3 wives and 4 concubines, just 1 is enough. The road you pointed out is good, but it's not suitable for me. The Li family only belongs to the special warfare system. I will take back everything of the Li family. Yes, I will take it back. Instead of getting something on the road of the Dongqing clan. I'm from the Li family, not from the Dongqing clan. Dongqing Wudi turned his head and looked at the woods outside the ancestral hall in silence. Dongqing Hanguang looked at Li Tianlan in a daze. His eyes were not angry, but a kind of sadness and pain that Li Tianlan could not understand, and even a trace of guilt. Your father, he opened his mouth and said with difficulty, he was also the commander of the Border Praetorian Corps. That's different. Li Tianlan said lightly. How could it be the same? 20 years ago, when the international situation was at its most tense, there were frequent border conflicts between countries. At that time, the Zhengzhou Praetorian Corps had just been established, and the personnel organization was not as large as it was now. At that time, the Border Control Corps was under the jurisdiction of the Special Warfare System of Zhongzhou State, not the military of Zhongzhou State. How could it be the same? Dongqing Hongguang smiled bitterly and suddenly remembered the name Dongqing Huangtu. If there was no accident, Li Tianlan also knew the name from Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai, what kind of magic potion did that woman give you? Tianlan, you'd better stay away from her. Dongqing Hongguang took a deep breath and said sincerely. Li Tianlan's face suddenly turned cold and he said coldly, you don't have to worry about it, old master. Well, Dad, let's go in first. Time's up. Dongqing Wudi saw that the atmosphere was about to freeze and had to stand up to smooth things over. He sighed inwardly. The old master's mentality was completely different from Tianlan's now. The last sentence should not have been said at this time. Dongqing Hongguang came to his senses a little and said, where's your little uncle? Hasn't he come yet? There were 5 brothers in the old master's generation. However, in the past years, 3 of them had died on the battlefield. Today, only he and the youngest Dongqing Hanjian were left. Dongqing Hanjian also lived on the mountain, not far away, but for some reason, he hadn't shown up yet. I'll call little uncle. Dad, take Tianlan and Qiuqi in first. Dongqing Wudi said and took out his mobile phone. Dongqing Hongguang nodded and walked directly into the ancestral hall with Li Tianlan and Dongqing Qiuqi. The ancestral hall in Dongqing City was divided into 3 sections. The space was huge. The first section was the stage, and on the left and right sides were wing rooms and wineries. It was an original ancient building. Walking in here, it was like walking into another era. The second section was the main hall. On weekdays, all the important meetings of the Dongqing clan were held here. The third section was the forbidden area of the Dongqing clan. Inside, there were all the spirit tablets of the deceased of the Dongqing clan. It was an independent courtyard, occupying almost a third of the ancestral hall. Dongqing Hongguang took the lead and walked into the courtyard of the third section. The spacious courtyard was quiet. The interior space was large, but it didn't seem spacious. Instead, it seemed a little crowded. Stone tablets appeared in front of Li Tianlan one after another, like a stone forest. Each stone tablet was densely engraved with small characters. A large number of stone tablets were arranged together, which was an indescribable shock. Li Tianlan subconsciously held his breath and began to read from the first stone tablet. One after another. The contents on the stone tablets were the same but not exactly the same. Each stone tablet was engraved with the life stories of the deceased of the Dongqing clan. The courtyard became quieter and quieter. All the noise seemed to have disappeared. Li Tianlan walked silently and looked at the stone tablets one after another. Understanding these stone tablets was almost equivalent to understanding the 7th generation of the Dongqing clan, which had been passed down to Dongqing Wudi's generation. For hundreds of years, this was the core and soul of the Dongqing clan. It had always been. 37 stone tablets. 37 people's lives. 31 people died in battle, and 6 people died of old age. Li Tianlan's face was flushed, and he only felt excited. Standing here, he felt like standing in front of the large cemetery behind the border camp. But this time, there was no resentment in Li Tianlan's heart, only glory. This was the glory and sorrow of the entire Dongqing clan. This was a crazy family, a glorious and cold-blooded family. A family that regarded killing as glory. Each stone tablet was engraved with 2 sentences, one in front and the other in the back, neat and uniform, stroke by stroke. Don't step back, even if it's warm. Don't look back, even if you miss it. On the indomitable road, in addition to the bodies of the losers, there are also the songs of the winners. We died for a good reason. Was this the motto of the entire Dongqing clan? Li Tianlan wanted to laugh, but his heart was unprecedentedly excited and heroic. The stone tablets in front of him were neat, like a forest of heroic souls. Behind these stone tablets was the Dongqing clan's unswerving determination to kill and the unperturbed death that had been passed down for hundreds of years. We died for a good reason. We died for a good reason. Li Tianlan clenched his fists subconsciously, and there was an emotion that almost made him look up to the sky and roar in his heart. He took a deep breath and bowed deeply to the stone forest in front of him, just for the dozens of cold-blooded and warm-blooded heroes of the Dongqing clan. This is the Dongqing clan. Tianlan, as long as you are willing, such a clan is willing to spare no effort to help you in the next few decades. If you ask for anything, we will grant it. Dongqing Hongguang's voice sounded in front of Li Tianlan, sonorous and powerful. Help me. Li Tianlan straightened up and looked at Dongqing Hongguang. Dongqing Hongguang looked at him without flinching, with all kinds of emotions flashing in his eyes, extremely complicated. Li Tianlan subconsciously turned his head to avoid the old man's eyes, and whispered, "Why? Old master, I'm not that noble, not to mention the friendship between the Dongqing clan and the Li family. If it's just because of friendship, if it were me, I wouldn't risk the destruction of the whole clan to pay for it. I can't do it, so I don't think others can do it." He said indifferently, "So, what on earth do you want for the Dongqing clan to help me like this?" "A child." Dongqing Hongguang said calmly, "You and Rushi are engaged. I want a child of you and Rushi. It's as simple as that. Nothing else?" "Yes, but I can't say." "Oh, then I can't believe it." Li Tianlan laughed at himself and said slowly, "And, what you want, I can't give it to you." He looked at the stone tablet in front of him, stepped forward, and whispered, "Old master, after offering incense, I'm going back to Huading. My girlfriend is still waiting for me. I miss her very much. I'll go with you." Dongqing Hongguang nodded and said. Li Tianlan stopped and suddenly looked back, his eyes as sharp as a knife. Dongqing Hongguang was still calm and said with a chuckle, "Don't be nervous, I just want to talk to her. By the way, I need Boss Qin to solve some problems for me. There are 5 free tickets every day, and they're all free. Brothers, don't forget to vote. Thank you. Thank you. How about changing the update time to 2:30 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. Chapter 77. Got the notice. Special warfare will be on the shelves next Monday. This. I want to inform you in advance. 6,000 words. Today it will be 10,000 words again. At 9:00 in the evening. The helicopter of the Dongqing clan landed on the open space of the Yonghua villa in Huading again. Li Tianlan, who had stayed in Zhongyuan province for less than a day, returned here. He was still accompanied by Dongqing Wudian Thunder God, but Dongqing Hongguang and Dongqing Qiuqi, 2 important figures of the Dongqing clan. Dongqing Qiuqi was the mayor of Wudong New District in Huading. She came back to work on the way, while Dongqing Hongguang came to ask Qin Weibai for help. Li Tianlan didn't say anything on the surface, but he had some guesses in his heart. The so-called help was mostly because of the name Dongqing Huangtu, which made him uneasy subconsciously. There were too many contradictions and mysteries behind the name Dongqing Huangtu. It seemed to be a taboo, hiding even deeper than the inside story of his father's treason case. Li Baidian and Ning Qianqing had never heard of him. Even Dongqing Qiuqi didn't know of his existence. When he asked Dongqing Qiuqi about him, her reaction didn't seem to be fake. If her reaction was real, what did it mean? Dongqing Qiuqi looked only 26 or 27 years old, but in fact, she was a senior official at the level of deputy governor of Zhongzhou state. She had lived in the Dongqing clan since she was a child, but she didn't know of Dongqing Huangtu's existence. He couldn't say that she lost her memory, could he? When Dongqing Qiuqi looked at him blankly and asked who Dongqing Huangtu was, Li Tianlan even felt that this person didn't exist at that moment. And in the ancestral hall of the Dongqing clan, Li Tianlan didn't see a stone tablet belonging to Dongqing Huangtu. Dongqing Hongguang's behavior was too abnormal, and his reaction seemed a little intense. Although he said he had never heard of the name, it seemed that he was trying to cover it up. Dongqing Huangtu did exist. At present, according to Li Tianlan's speculation, he should have died 30 years ago, which was the most reasonable possibility. Only in this way could he explain why even a core figure like Dongqing Chuqi didn't know of Dongqing Huangtu's existence. Maybe she was just born then. Maybe she didn't remember. And this was the only way to explain the absence of Dongqing Huangtu in the major events that happened in the past 2 decades. But this most reasonable explanation also had a big loophole for Li Tianlan. Qin Weibai said that she had met Dongqing Huangtu and even got her belongings. In terms of timing, it didn't match at all. So far, it seemed that all the information he got about Dongqing Huangtu was extremely confusing and even contradictory. Li Tianlan didn't know what this meant. He wanted to have a good talk with Qin Weibai, but he was worried that she would think he was petty and jealous. He could ignore what others thought, but he couldn't ignore what Qin Weibai thought of him. When the plane was about to land, Li Tianlan looked at the Yonghua villa in the distance and simply stopped thinking about it. He was just curious. No matter what, Dongqing Huangtu had died, so it had little to do with him. There would be no conflict of interest. So he simply let it go. It had nothing to do with him anyway. Standing on the lawn where the helicopter landed and looking at Qin Weibai's villa in sight, Li Tianlan led the way with a soft expression. He hoped that after Dongqing Hanguang met Qin Weibai this time, the engagement between him and Dongqing Rushi would disappear. Building number 9, that's my home. Li Tianlan pointed to the villa in front of him, which was still lit up. It seemed that because he was close, his voice became warm, and there was a strange light in his eyes. Dongqing Hanguang took a deep look at him, nodded, and said nothing. They entered the courtyard one by one. The front door of the villa was pushed open from the inside to the outside, and Qin Weibai's figure appeared at the door with a quiet and soft smile. Dressed in a white dress, black stockings, and high heels, her silky long hair was carefully tied up. She stood quietly in front of the door, like a wife welcoming her husband home. Every move she made seemed to exude a beauty and gentleness that seemed to emanate from her bones. Li Tianlan slightly quickened his pace and came to her. He whispered, "Why are you dressed like this?" "I took a project in Qinzhou. I just came back from the company and haven't had time to change clothes." Qin Weibai said softly, holding Li Tianlan's hand. The light in the villa bathed her, making her seem to exude a very warm light, soft and dignified. "Are you hungry? I'll prepare the meal." "Don't bother." Dongqing Hanguang's voice sounded behind him, and his tone was a little complicated. "We are uninvited guests. Sorry to disturb you, Boss Qin. Old master, when Chuchi got married the year before last, I went to the Dongqing clan and almost became Chuchi's bridesmaid. I lived there for nearly a week. Now you say this, do you blame me for not knowing the etiquette and not visiting you?" Qin Weibai held Li Tianlan's hand tightly and said with a soft smile. Dongqing Hanguang laughed heartily, and even the complex emotions in his eyes seemed to fade a lot. They walked into the villa while chatting. Li Tianlan didn't see horsewoman, but he saw flaming fire in the kitchen. He asked casually, "Where are the headmaster and Badian?" "After you left, they went straight back to the Sky Academy. The headmaster said that it's not peaceful outside now, and it's safer in the Sky Academy." Qin Weibai replied. Li Tianlan nodded slightly and took Ning Qiancheng and Li Badian back to the Sky Academy for protection. Although it was a concession, it was the safest way. "Is it about the Zhong family and the Tan family?" Dongqing Wudi said, "Don't worry, Boss Qin. After leaving Huading, I'll go to Yuzhou and then return to the border. Zhongzhou State will give you an explanation. As for the 2 families in private, Marshal, don't worry about it in private. I can handle the Zhong family and the Tan family," Qin Weibai said lightly. Qin Weibai said lightly. When she mentioned the 2 wealthy families in Huading, there was no other emotion in her tone except confidence. In this state, Qin Weibai was strong and cold, which was the most fascinating thing to see. Dongqing Wudi nodded with a smile. He glanced at Li Tianlan and said softly, "This boy looks calm, but he's actually reckless." Tianlan, have you ever thought about what will happen to you if the Sky Academy doesn't care about you and it's inconvenient for Boss Qin to take action after you crippled Zhong Xiaofeng? Yes. Li Tianlan nodded and said calmly, at worst, it'll be a life and death struggle. I don't have the resources and connections of the Zhong family and the Tan family, but what I have, the Zhong family and the Tan family don't. As long as I have a sword, no one can take it. Dongqing Wudi was slightly stunned. A life and death struggle. He smiled bitterly. This kind of crazy temperament was exactly the same as the Dongqing clan. They sat down on the sofa. Knowing that they were coming, Qin Weibai had already made tea. The living room was filled with the fragrance of tea. Qin Weibai lifted the teapot, as if she didn't know how to take care of the guests at all. She poured the first cup of tea to Li Tianlan and whispered, "Be careful, it's hot." Dongqing Hanguang and Dongqing Wudi, who were left out, looked at each other. They were not angry, but their eyes were strange and they looked confused. Dongqing Chuchi looked even more incredulous. When she got married, Qin Weibai really almost became her bridesmaid, but Qin Weibai's charm was almost irresistible. Even in a bridesmaid's dress, Qin Weibai's limelight directly overshadowed her, the bride, so she gave up. But it was enough to show the relationship between the two. The word best friend was appropriate. During the few years they had known each other, Dongqing Chuchi had a deep understanding of Qin Weibai's pride and indifference. In Huading, she had seen a lot of so-called successful men who would be overjoyed just because Qin Weibai said a few words to them. She had also seen a lot of rich and powerful men like Wang Xiaoyao who felt lost in front of Qin Weibai. She had seen a lot, and naturally understood how noble, reserved and unattainable Qin Weibai was in the hearts of those men. More than once, she had been curious about what kind of partner Qin Weibai, who regarded all men as nothing, would find to spend her life with. She even thought that her best friend would be alone for the rest of her life. In the end, instead of being single, she found a boyfriend at a speed that made everyone dumbfounded, and they were living together. At this moment, Dongqing Chuchi looked at Qin Weibai in front of her. It was really familiar and strange. Was this considerate, docile, and gentle woman sitting next to Li Tianlan really the same person as Boss Qin, who used to be proud and reserved, her bestie? She subconsciously looked at Li Tianlan. She didn't know what her cheap brother-in-law was capable of to train Qin Weibai like this. She thought of her younger sister, Dongqing Rushi, and shook her head. She had mixed feelings. Boss Qin, I've been a soldier all my life, and I don't know how to beat around the bush. I have something I need you to clear up for me. I wonder if you'd like to talk to me alone. Dongqing Hanguang was completely straightforward, especially in the face of things he cared about. He sat down on the sofa, took a sip of the hot tea in front of him, and said directly. About Dongqing Huang too. Qin Weibai looked at Li Tianlan's profile seriously, as if she could not get enough of it. Hearing Dongqing Hanguang's words, she blinked and chuckled. Dongqing Hanguang and Dongqing Wudi's pupils contracted instantly. She really knew something. Yes. Dongqing Hanguang took a deep breath and said in a dignified tone, Boss Qin, can I have a word with you? Who is Dongqing Huang to? Is he also a member of our Dongqing clan? Dongqing Chuchi was stunned. She first glanced at Li Tianlan, and then looked at Dongqing Wudi and asked in a doubtful tone. Chuchi. Dongqing Wudi's face changed, and his tone was slightly heavier. Dongqing Chuchi was stunned, and then stopped asking. Okay, let's go to the study. Qin Weibai stood up. She looked at Li Tianlan's slightly frowning eyebrows, smiled, and said softly, you stay and take care of the guests. I'll be right back. Li Tianlan nodded and watched Qin Weibai and Dongqing Hanguang walk into the study. He narrowed his eyes thoughtfully. Dongqing Chuchi looked at Li Tianlan's expression, suddenly smiled, and said softly, you're really lucky, boy. Li Tianlan was stunned. Maybe you didn't realize it yourself, but when Xiao Bai is with you, her eyes don't seem to have anything else in them. All the time, her eyes are on you. It seems like she likes you to the bone. To have such a beautiful woman as your girlfriend, and in the future, you will have my sister. Don't tell me you don't have the fortune. Dongqing Chuchi looked at Li Tianlan with a strange look in her eyes. Li Tianlan smiled and picked up the teacup to drink. Qin Weibai's study was clean and elegant, and all the decorations were clear at a glance. Bookcases, sofas, desks, and water dispensers were simple. Only the golden carpet on the ground added a trace of luxury to the study. Qin Weibai came to the desk and didn't pour water for Dongqing Hanguang. She sat down behind the desk and said calmly, "What does the old master want to know?" Dongqing Hanguang was silent for a moment. It seemed that he didn't expect Qin Weibai to be so straightforward. He narrowed his eyes and said softly, "Boss Qin, where did you hear the name Huangtu? Is it important?" Qin Weibai looked into Dongqing Hanguang's eyes. "If you know it, others can naturally know it. How can there be an impenetrable wall? Don't you think so, old master?" Dongqing Hanguang lowered his head and pondered. He inadvertently lit a cigarette. When the smoke drifted away, he was shocked. When he subconsciously wanted to put it out, Qin Weibai shook her head and said casually, "It doesn't matter. Tianlan also smokes. I'm not allergic to the smell of smoke." Dongqing Hanguang smiled bitterly, and his eyes were struggling. He looked at the stunning woman in front of him, who had a mysterious aura around her in everyone's eyes, and tentatively said, "In Zhongyuan province, Tianlan said that Huangtu was besieged and died. It's betrayal." Qin Weibai's face grew colder. In the lingering smoke, Dongqing Hanguang couldn't see her eyes clearly. Only a cold voice sounded and drilled into his ears. Besieging was a statement to the public. The real cause of his death was betrayal. Dongqing Hanguang instantly straightened up, and the momentum of a thunder-shocking realm expert soared. Who was it? The person he loved the most was also the person who loved him the most. Qin Weibai's tone was as calm as stagnant water. Dongqing Hanguang's expression changed dramatically. His lips moved, and a name was on the tip of his tongue. He wanted to say it, but he didn't dare. "It's not the one you think." Qin Weibai shook her head calmly. After a short silence, she said again, "Do you know how Li Kuangtu died that year? What happened that year was too coincidental, too coincidental." "What do you want to say?" Dongqing Hanguang's face grew paler and paler, even a little painful. "You've guessed it, but I have no evidence, so I can't give you an answer. Your guess is probably what I think." Qin Weibai glanced at him and pointed to the water dispenser. "If you want to drink water, help yourself." Dongqing Hanguang smiled bitterly and shook his head. He said sadly, "Then what should I do now?" His expression was bleak, but there was an extreme coldness and anger in his tone. "You don't need to do anything. Just wait. When Tianlan grows up, I will help him, at all costs, with all my might." Qin Weibai's eyes were bright and dazzling, full of indescribable affection and persistence. Dongqing Hanguang was silent for a long time before he asked, "Samsara is in Billy state. Does it need help from the Dongqing clan? If you're willing, I want to borrow 10 heavenly rainbow from the Dongqing clan. Of course, we will give you a satisfactory reward afterward." Qin Weibai was quiet, but what she said hit Dongqing Hanguang's heart directly. Heavenly rainbow. As a military giant, the Dongqing clan had been concentrating on researching some firearms that could pose a fatal threat to the masters of the 4 realms of martial arts in recent years. An important figure of the Dongqing clan even had a lifelong wish to research a quasi-murderous weapon. At present, the most famous product of the Dongqing clan was Mad Shot. Heavenly Rainbow was an upgraded version of Mad Shot, with higher cost and more sophisticated structure. 10 heavenly rainbows. The Dongqing clan now had 10 heavenly rainbows at most. This kind of weapon that had not yet been put into service was a top secret in the Dongqing clan. How did Qin Weibai know? The intelligence agency of Samsara is really resourceful. I admire it. Dongqing Hanguang took a deep breath and said, "I can lend you heavenly rainbow. It's a loan. What can Samsara give the Dongqing clan?" A full blow from a murderous weapon. Qin Weibai lowered her eyelids and said blandly. Dongqing Hanguang narrowed his eyes. A full blow from a murderous weapon. Although the 12 murderous weapons in the Dark World were ranked in order, each of them could pose a huge threat to the masters of the Invincible Realm, even a fatal threat. This condition was extremely valuable. Which murderous weapon? Dongqing Hanguang asked attentively. Qin Weibai didn't say anything. She just kept silent. Dongqing Hanguang seemed to understand. He nodded and stood up, saying, I'll send someone to send Heavenly Rainbow tomorrow. He turned to the door. When he was about to go out, he suddenly turned back and whispered, Samsara knows the Heavenly Rainbow of the Dongqing clan. It's surprising, but it's not impossible. But where did Boss Qin hear the name of Huang Tu? How can you even know anything about him? Qin Weibai turned her head and looked at the night outside the window. After a long silence, she whispered, There's an old monk. I used to follow him for several years. Dongqing Hanguang took the lead to walk out of the study. Seeing him, Li Tianlan stood up subconsciously. Just as he was about to say something, Qin Weibai followed him out. Dad. Dongqing Wudi stood up subconsciously and called him. Dongqing Hanguang looked at Li Tianlan with a complicated look in his eyes, then nodded and said in a low voice, Go back to Zhongyuan. Dongqing Wudi was stunned. He didn't seem to expect the old master to be so straightforward. He nodded silently and walked to the door. Qin Weibai and Li Tianlan walked them out of the villa. Standing at the door, Qin Weibai glanced at Dongqing Qiuqi and said with a smile, You're not staying here tonight? Forget it. I don't want to be a third wheel. Dongqing Qiuqi giggled. There's a standing committee meeting at the beginning of the month tomorrow. I'll call you after the meeting. Shall we go to the beauty salon together? Forget it. Qin Weibai shook her head, looked at Li Tianlan, and said softly, I'm going to Billy's State tomorrow night. I'll accompany Tianlan during the day. Dongqing Qiuqi smiled playfully, nodded, and left after Dongqing Wudi. Are you leaving tomorrow? Li Tianlan looked at Qin Weibai and asked in a disappointed tone. It was an impromptu decision to come back this time. I need to arrange things over there as soon as possible. Qin Weibai took Li Tianlan back to the villa and took him directly to the dining room. At most half a year. I can come back in half a year. During my absence, you're not allowed to be abducted by Wang Yuetong or Dongqing Rushi. Do you understand? Li Tianlan nodded with a wry smile, but he was not in high spirits. Qin Weibai glanced at him and then at Flaming Fire, who was still busy in the kitchen. Is the soup ready? Yes. Flaming Fire answered. I made soup for you at noon. The heat is just right now. Drink some. Qin Weibai looked at Li Tianlan and said, then walked into the kitchen. Flaming Fire came out with Qin Weibai, who was holding a bowl of soup. She glanced at Li Tianlan. The supermaster of Samsara went upstairs with no expression on his face. Out of sight, out of mind. Qin Weibai put the soup on the table and sat opposite Li Tianlan. She said softly, It's very nutritious. Have a taste. You should pay attention to nutrition in the future. Life at the border is too hard. Now, try as much as you can. Li Tianlan drank the soup in silence and nodded without saying anything. What's wrong? Are you unhappy? Qin Weibai's tone became lower and gentler. No, I just feel a little reluctant to see you leave tomorrow. I really can't bear to see you go. A hero's spirit is short and love is long. Today, I finally understand the meaning of this. Li Tianlan took a big gulp of the soup, as if he wanted to suppress the sadness in his heart. He shook his head helplessly. Humph, Qin Weibai snorted softly, and her eyes were like silk. Coaxing me with sweet words again. What do you want? Li Tianlan glanced at Qin Weibai, and his heart skipped a beat. Tianlan, Qin Weibai's tone became more and more charming. Do you want me to crawl over, or do you want me to crawl over? Li Tianlan breathed heavily. He stared straight at Qin Weibai's face and stammered, crawl over. Qin Weibai seemed to have gotten the answer. She glared at Li Tianlan, and her eyes were charming and shy. Her body quietly slipped under the table and crawled under Li Tianlan's feet. She knelt down on her knees in front of Li Tianlan. I know this by accident. I didn't do it well. Don't laugh at me. Under the table, Qin Weibai's voice was trembling, charming and gentle. A pair of small trembling hands reached over and found his belt. In the rustling sound, a gentle and delicate warm touch came directly. Li Tianlan gasped. All that was left in his mind was Qin Weibai's rosy and delicate mouth. That was the second heaven. Li Tianlan's mind was blank. 1 minute. 5 minutes. His body became tighter and tighter. Finally, he collapsed on the chair. He seemed to have no strength at all. Qin Weibai poked her head out from under the table. She pouted and looked at Li Tianlan. Eat it. At this moment, Li Tianlan didn't know what he was thinking. He subconsciously opened his mouth and ordered in a tough tone. Qin Weibai blinked and looked at him with resentment in her eyes. She moved her mouth and finally swallowed everything in her mouth. Bad guy, she said softly and looked into Li Tianlan's eyes. Li Tianlan's mind was blank. His eyes were red. A raging fire was burning in his chest, making him crazy. Drink soup. Drink shit. He suddenly bent down, picked up Qin Weibai's delicate body, and rushed upstairs. Qin Weibai exclaimed and patted Li Tianlan's back with her small hand. She smiled and said, "Put me down first. Rinse your mouth. It's so dirty." Well, it should be, okay. Well, it's okay. The chapter of more than 6,000 words could have been posted at 2:00. But there were too many words, so I wrote a little longer. Thank you to Tree in the Sky, Moon by the River, Husband Xiaoyu, Zero Icicle, and Yuan Yuan for your support and monthly votes. Thank you. Brothers, vote for Special Warfare if you have the votes. Chapter 78. On the shelves next Monday. Advance notice. When Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai sent several important figures of the Dongqing clan out of the villa, on the balcony of the 7th building, less than 300 meters away from Yonghua Villa, a middle-aged man in a black robe was quietly watching the scene in front of him through a telescope. Through the telescope, Dongqing Wudi and Dongqing Hanguang walked in the direction of the helicopter, Dongqing Chuchi left from another road, and Li Tianlan took Qin Weibai's hand and returned to the villa. Seeing all this, the black-robed man's mouth twitched, and his face became dignified. What's wrong, black-robed man? Did you see any big shots? Next to Black Robe, a woman who was also dressed in black looked at his expression and spoke with a gentle smile. Although the woman's appearance was ordinary, her temperament was gentle and elegant. She had a mature and intellectual feeling to her. Especially when she smiled, her every move was extremely charming. Even if her appearance was ordinary, this kind of person who exuded a womanly aura from her bones could still be considered a stunner. Big shots. The black-robed man raised the corner of his mouth, and his smile was a little cold. They are really big. How many of the 2 patriarchs of the Dongqing clan are bigger than them? Dongqing clan. The expression of the black-robed woman changed, and her eyes became vigilant. West Kunlun, North Taibai, and South Dongqing. Among the 3 superpowers, the Dongqing clan was the only one without an invincible realm expert, but it was also the most troublesome target for these foreign forces. The internal structure of Kunlun City was complicated, involving too many interests and secrets. In Zhongzhou State, when one met Kunlun City, there was no need to rush to fight. There was still the possibility of a transaction, and the possibility was not too low. Sai City of Taibai Mountain stood aloof from worldly affairs. It guarded the northeast of Zhongzhou State all year round, deterring countries such as Snow Country, Outer Mongolia, Gaoshan, and White Robe. Without clear orders from the higher-ups of Zhongzhou state, they would hardly intervene in matters outside the northeast. Only the Dongqing clan was the craziest and the most unreasonable. Dongqing Wudi was known as the god of massacre, but it did not mean that his ancestors were nice people. This family, which had been decisive in killing for hundreds of years, seemed to be extremely bloodthirsty in nature. The patriarch of each generation could be said to be a ruthless person who killed without blinking. When Dongqing Hongguang served as a member of the decision-making committee of Zhongzhou State and the standing minister of army headquarters, he had caused heavy losses to their organizations. After Dongqing Wudi took over the border Praetorian Corps, he had made their organization suffer for many years. About 13 years ago, the news that hundreds of elites from their organization had sneaked into the border to pick up an important person was leaked. As the commander of the Border Control Corps, Dongqing Wudi personally led people to intercept them. Hundreds of elites were wiped out at the border of Zhongzhou State. It was at that time that Dongqing Wudi stood among countless corpses and said something, which was still talked about by people in the dark world. None of my enemies survived. This crazy style of action, which was so crazy that as long as they were enemies, they would not leave anyone alive. Not to mention foreign forces like them, even many people in Zhongzhou State did not approve of it. International human rights organizations even blacklisted the entire Dongqing clan. However, the Dongqing clan always went their own way. Every time they fought, there was bound to be a river of blood. For people from foreign forces like them, few big shots in Zhongzhou State were more important than the Dongqing clan. The woman in black's eyes flickered. There was vigilance, but more of a hidden killing intent. Why did the Dongqing clan come here? She whispered to herself and subconsciously narrowed her eyes. Does the Dongqing clan have something to do with samsara? Isn't that what we want? The black-robed man sneered, and his eyes were a little ferocious. Rose, what are you worried about? The more forces that boy is involved with, the better it is for us, and it is in the best interest of the second master. If not, why would the second master let you and Yuehua help me? The woman was not angry at all. She became more and more gentle like water and perfectly integrated with the night. She shook her head slightly and said softly, I'm worried that the Dongqing clan will become a variable. These days, I heard that the young man disabled Zhong Xiaofeng, the youngest son of the Zhong family. Tan Qinghua even brought the elites of the Eastern Theater of Operations to seek revenge. It was Zhuang Huayang who held Tan Qinghua back until Dongqing Wudi came to help. We always thought that Dongqing Wudi did it for Ning Qiancheng. So what? The black-robed man's tone was cold and cruel, and his words were full of killing intent. In the organization, he was not good at planning anything, but he was one of the best executors. Although his realm had been regressing over the years and he was about to leave the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, he had always maintained a high degree of tacit understanding with the second master for many years. So even compared with his heyday, his status in the organization did not decline much. Moreover, the target this time was Li Tianlan, the descendant of the Li family who had caused him serious inner demons for many years. How could he be in the mood to think about other things now? Now, almost every thought he had was about how to torture that little bastard to feel good. Rose glanced at him and then at the black-robed man's ferocious look. She sighed and knew that he would not listen to anything at this time, so she simply stopped talking. She turned her head again and looked at the 9th building, which looked hazy in the night. Her emotions fluctuated, and for the first time, she hesitated about the upcoming action. Hasn't Yuehua come yet? The black-robed man asked in a gloomy tone as he watched Dongqing Wudi and his son walk away through the telescope. She's accompanying the second master. She'll come later. Rose's tone was indifferent and her face was calm. The black-robed man glanced at her and said no more. In terms of foundation and history, their organization was not much worse than the Wang family of Beihai. Although it was difficult for a while after they left Zhongzhou State in the early years, after they found another foundation, after hundreds of years of development, they had flourished and gathered experts. There were many experts of the thunder-shocking realm in their organization, but there were very few women, especially the very charming female thunder-shocking realm experts. Rose was one of them, and so was Yuehua. Both of them were the mistresses of the second master. Now Yuehua was accompanying the second master, but Rose was waiting for him here. Maybe she was already jealous. The black-robed man was very wise not to talk about this topic. Rose turned back to the villa and went straight to the hall. She sniffed the smell of blood in the air and frowned in disgust, but she did not say anything. They were not the owners of this villa, but in the entire villa area, this villa was the only one that was safe enough to observe the situation in the 9th building. Black Robe was like a dove occupying a magpie's nest. He directly killed the owner of the villa. The bodies of the owner's family were still on the side, and blood was flowing in the living room. Rose did not like this kind of atmosphere, but fortunately, it was only for one night, so she reluctantly endured it and passed. She pulled out a small box from the corner of the living room, walked back to the balcony, opened the small box, and took out an instrument from inside. She said, "Don't look at it. I'll just turn on the machine. Someone from the headquarters will take action later to invade Huading's traffic network. But we need to use the instrument here to complete the positioning and scan all the vehicles near the 9th building. In this way, when we take action tomorrow, we can control their position at any time." She paused and said with a smile, "I can have a good sleep tonight." The black-robed man put aside the telescope in his hand, looked gloomy, and did not speak. A phone suddenly rang. Rose took out her mobile phone and glanced at the number. She immediately answered and said softly, "Second Master. How's the preparation going?" On the other end of the phone, Second Master's low and soft voice sounded. "The target has returned to the 9th building. Everything is ready. We'll find the right time to take action." Rose held the mobile phone and reported in a cautious tone. "There's no need to look for it. Tomorrow morning is the best time. Tell the black-robed man that he must kill that young man. He can only succeed, not fail." Second Master's voice was still low on the phone, but there was a hint of coldness in it. Rose grunted and was silent for a few seconds. She suddenly said, "Is it because of her?" "Who?" "Qin Weibai. You saw her once in England 2 years ago." "I know. Now you see her living with Li Tianlan. Are you jealous?" Rose gritted her teeth and plucked up her courage to ask. "Ridiculous." Second Master's breath stagnated, and then he became a little angry. "Rose, remember your identity. This is not a problem you should care about. I've asked Moonlight to bring a recovery potion to the black-robed man. You must kill that young man, understand? Recovery potion. It could be said to be one of the high-level potions within their organization. It could restore people to their peak strength in a short time when they were seriously injured. For people like the black-robed man who were not seriously injured, after taking the recovery potion, he could completely return to his peak state. This time, they just wanted to assassinate a non-entity who had not reached the ice-condensing realm, but they sent 3 experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. This style of doing things could no longer be described as striving to be foolproof. "I thought you were going to lend the murderous weapon of the organization to the black-robed man. Isn't it better to kill the target with one shot?" Rose said in a somewhat agitated tone, her voice sharp. The black-robed man looked at her in surprise, turned around and quickly left the rooftop. It would do him no good to listen to this kind of conversation. On the phone, Second Master took a deep breath and said in a cold tone, "Rose, your current mood is no longer suitable for this action." Rose grasped the phone tightly, bit her lips, and said nothing. For the glory of the organization, what's the point of personal feelings? Tomorrow is the most suitable opportunity. Once Li Tianlan dies, Zhongzhou state will become extremely lively. This is our chance, the chance we've been dreaming of. What kind of nonsense are you talking to me about? The second master's tone was extremely heavy. He was usually a person who did not show his emotions on his face. With such a tone, it was obvious how agitated he was right now. Rose took a deep breath and forced herself to calm down. She held the phone and said, "Li Tianlan is not so simple. Dongqing Wudi and Dongqing Hanguang have just come to the number 9 villa, and the academic style of doing things is stable. But this time, Zhuang Huayang protected Li Tianlan at the risk of falling out with the prince group, which is enough to explain the problem. I know you want to use Li Tianlan's death to lure Li Honghe out. But if the Li family, Samsara, Dongqing clan, and the academics unite, what kind of power will it be? Second master, this action is too risky. The more she spoke, the lower her tone became. The more she spoke, the more she felt that her inference was correct. This time, it was not a big deal, but now so many forces were involved. A slight move in one part would affect the whole. Once Li Tianlan died, who knew whether it would be a surprise or a nightmare waiting for them? Isn't that just right? Second master was silent for a while and said with a chuckle, do it cleanly. What's the risk? At that time, you just need to hold horsewoman and military counselor with moonlight. Even with flaming fire, you can hold them for a while. Can you do it? Even if Li Tianlan re-enters the fire-flaming realm, how long can he last in the hands of the black-robed man who has taken the recovery potion? Rose was silent. Somehow, she felt more and more uneasy. After a long silence, she suddenly said, Second master, have you ever thought that if Li Tianlan's highest realm was not the fire-flaming realm? How can the successor of the Li family be ordinary? With their inheritance, if Li Tianlan's talent is good enough, it is not impossible for him to enter the thunder-shocking realm. They have the invincible manual. So what? Second master's tone was a little impatient. He is only in the chi-controlling realm now. Even if Li Tianlan is lucky enough to enter the thunder-shocking realm, he will die once he uses the power of the thunder-shocking realm. Do we need to discuss this topic now? But in case, there is no in case. If there is a so-called in case, then give up the black-robed man. He should have died 20 years ago. Who can recognize him now? Rose's face changed and she fell silent again. Give up the black-robed man? Maybe this was the worst plan of second master. But was it really worth it? Rose, tomorrow is the best chance, even a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Second master explained patiently, I got a very reliable news. After his son was disabled, Zhong Yongming didn't say much at the meeting of the decision-making committee. He just emphasized the importance of the stability of Huading. The more he did this, the crazier they would be to retaliate against Li Tianlan in private. What you don't know is that Wang Tianzong took his heir to Kunlun City yesterday and split Kunlun City with a sword. Gu Xingyun has said today that he asked the Wang family of Beihai to give him an explanation. What's more coincidental is that Gu Qianchuan has come to Huading, and Wang Tianzong is about to arrive now. He will meet Li Tianlan tomorrow morning. After this meeting, the black-robed man will kill Li Tianlan. What do you think will happen then? Rose held the phone and felt her scalp tingle. If that was the case, if Li Tianlan died, the Li family would lose all hope. What would Li Honghe do in despair at the border? Once Li Honghe made a move, Samsara, Dongqing clan, and the academics would react immediately. Who was their target? The Zhong family was most likely to retaliate against Li Tianlan. The Wang family of Beihai had enough standing to kill Li Tianlan. And Kunlun City was eager to get rid of the Li family. Coincidentally, Li Tianlan would meet Wang Tianzong tomorrow. What was more coincidental was that Gu Qianchuan was in Huading at this time. With so many coincidences, what kind of storm would break out under their deliberate operation? After the storm, would there be a situation that the organization had always wanted to see in Zhongzhou State? Where will Li Tianlan meet Wang Tianzong tomorrow? Rose asked in a low voice. In an instant, she had made up her mind. This was indeed the best chance and worth a gamble. Garden party. It's secretly arranged by Wang Xiaoyao. Second master said flatly, but don't worry. After tomorrow's meeting, the boy will probably return to the Sky Academy. At that time, we will kill him near the gate of the Sky Academy. Otherwise, I'm afraid that the academics won't take action. Then the show won't be so wonderful. Rose said yes and hung up the phone. Thinking of the news second master said, she shook her head subconsciously. The meeting between Li Tianlan and Wang Tianzong was personally arranged by Wang Xiaoyao. Such a top-secret thing should be spread out. After hundreds of years of wind and rain, the Wang family of Beihai seemed to be a little unstable inside. She stood silently on the balcony, looking at the increasingly blurred Villa number 9. Her eyes gradually became sharp. The Li family. Li Tianlan. The right time, the right place, and the right people. The general trend was coming, and the storm was about to rise. How could you not die? How dare you not die? Today's 11,000 words were updated. More before the bookshelf. I'm trying my best. Chapter 79. It will be published tomorrow. It will be another 5,000 word chapter. Do you think it will be more than 10,000 words today? At 9:00 in the morning. While Li Tianlan was sleeping soundly, the sudden ringing of the phone disturbed his dream. Li Tianlan moved in a daze and instinctively wanted to ignore the ringing, but the caller was extremely persistent. The phone rang again and again, and the originally pleasant ringtone became more and more harsh. He frowned and reached out to pick up the phone next to the pillow. He put the phone to his ear and said hello. Senior brother, are you back to Huading? Wang Yuedong's sweet voice sounded on the phone. It was crisp and sounded like a well-hidden joy. Li Tianlan was a little confused. Huading, Zhongyuan, Huading, Zhongyuan, he had been flying back and forth these 2 days. In addition, he was in a trance, so he couldn't tell where he was for a while. He moved his body, and Qin Weibai, who was obediently held in his arms, also moved. Her small hands holding him also slightly tightened. Smelling the rich fragrance in the air, Li Tianlan's mind became clear. He said, "What's the matter?" "I'm on my way to Yonghua Villa. I'll be there in about 15 minutes. Wang Yuetong giggled. The little princess of the Wang family of Beihai, who seemed to be deeply shocked by Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai living together a day ago, seemed to be full of blood and blood. She said in a relaxed tone, "My father is now in Huading, and he wants to see you." Wang Tianzong, the Sword Emperor of Zhongzhou State. Li Tianlan's mind was completely sober in an instant. He frowned slightly, but before he could speak, Wang Yuedong's sweet and clear voice continued to ring, "You have to see him, senior brother. You owe me." Beep, 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 the phone was hung up. Li Tianlan held the phone in a daze for a while, shook his head, and was ready to get up. However, as soon as he moved, Qin Weibai subconsciously stuck to him again. Feeling the smooth skin of the beauty beside him, Li Tianlan was excited again. Then he smiled bitterly and lowered his head to kiss Qin Weibai's face. Qin Weibai reached out her small hand and wiped her face. She murmured sleepily, "I'm so tired." Li Tianlan coughed awkwardly. He had indeed gone a little crazy last night. Qin Weibai's charm could really make people lose their minds. Every little expression and every little interest could make him lose control. The two of them tossed and turned until dawn before they fell asleep in a daze. When they woke up at this time, whether it was him or Qin Weibai, their spirits were a little overwhelmed. The sun was shining brightly outside. Li Tianlan lay back on the bed and sighed softly. In this kind of weather, it was the most comfortable to hold his beloved woman in bed. Even if they did nothing, it was much better than going out. Who called? Qin Weibai opened her eyes reluctantly. She wrapped herself around Li Tianlan and asked sleepily. Wang Yuetong. Somehow, Li Tianlan felt a little guilty. He coughed and said in a low voice, "Wang Tianzong came to Huading and said he wanted to see me." Qin Weibai's somewhat confused and lazy eyes suddenly focused, and she seemed to be thinking about something. "It's okay to see him. It's okay." After a moment of silence, she sat up from the bed and fetched some clothes for Li Tianlan. In Zhongzhou State, if the Sword Emperor wanted to see someone, he had to see him or not. Even if the Samsara and the Dongqing clan stood together, it would be useless. Besides, it was just a meeting. How big a deal could it be? Li Tianlan agreed and let Qin Weibai help him get dressed. In addition to being satisfied, he looked at her serious expression and even a little complacent. I wanted to spend some alone time with you today, but it seems that I can't. After the meeting, you should go back to the Sky Academy. It's a little unsafe outside now. I'll fly to Billy State in the afternoon or evening. It may be better when I come back. Qin Weibai tidied Li Tianlan's collar and said softly. Is it dangerous? Li Tianlan looked into Qin Weibai's eyes seriously and asked, what kind of organization is Samsara? What are you going to do in Billy State? Qin Weibai's bright eyes flickered and she said with a smile, Samsara is Samsara Palace. Compared with super dark forces like the Wang family of Beihai, Samsara Palace can only be regarded as a rookie. Because of its small staff and simple organization, it has always been very mysterious in the eyes of the outside world. Samsara wants to narrow the gap with those super forces. Billy State is a very key step, and it is also something we have been planning recently. This time, people will die, but I will be fine. My sister will protect me. She is an expert of the invincible realm. There are also strong and weak experts of the invincible realm. Li Tianlan said calmly, but he felt a little uneasy for no reason. It seemed that Qin Weibai's trip was very dangerous. Don't worry, my sister is very strong. She is of the invincible realm on the divine list, and her ranking is very high. I'll introduce her to you someday and let her guide you in martial arts. Qin Weibai helped Li Tianlan get dressed and wrapped herself in the quilt again. She squinted and said with a smile, during the time I'm not here, you behave yourself, okay? Li Tianlan said yes, suddenly bent down, held Qin Weibai's head, and kissed her hard. Qin Weibai whimpered, put her arms around Li Tianlan's neck, and pulled him to the bed. After a long time, their lips parted. Qin Weibai's face was red. She bit her lip and said with a low smile, you are getting more and more barbaric. Go. Li Tianlan's cell phone rang again. He looked at the number, whispered, be careful, and turned to walk directly out of the bedroom. Outside the villa, Wang Yuedong's colorful blue Porsche was already parked at the door. She did not get out of the car. When she saw Li Tianlan coming out, she casually pressed the horn. Li Tianlan got in the car, looking calm. Senior brother, good morning. Smelling the delicate fragrance of a woman coming from Li Tianlan, Wang Yuedong's heart was sour, but her smile was still sweet. Morning. Li Tianlan nodded. He was overworked last night, and now he was still a little tired and in a trance. I prepared breakfast for you. Eat some first. Wang Yuetong pointed to the food bag on the center console and said. The Porsche 718 could be said to be the entry-level version of the Porsche series. The internal storage space was so little that it made people want to cry. The food bag on the center console was an eyesore. Li Tianlan thanked her without hesitation. When Wang Yuetong drove out of the villa area, he also finished a cup of coffee and a burger. Why does His Highness Sword Emperor want to see me? Li Tianlan asked in a flat tone. Now he would not deliberately ignore Wang Yuetong, nor would he tease the most sensitive mind of the girl. But the alienation in his words was obvious. He clearly did not want to be too close to her. Nothing. I just want to see you, the wind and thunder veins, and thank you for saving my life. Wang Yuetong said with a smile. Her big eyes blinked, pure and enchanting. Today, she was dressed in a cartoon sweater, jeans, and canvas shoes. She looked gentle and quiet, but combined with her enchanting temperament, she suddenly looked like a charming little goblin. Little goblin, thinking of Qin Weibai's words, Li Tianlan smiled with soft eyes. You don't have to thank me. He shook his head and said, I've said it. We are even. Even. Wang Yuetong turned to look at Li Tianlan with burning eyes. What about the debt with Ning Qiancheng? I will pay it back as soon as possible. Li Tianlan turned to look out of the window and said coldly, where shall we meet? Garden party. Wang Yuedong's big eyes were slightly dim, and she subconsciously sped up. This was the second time Li Tianlan came to the garden party. After parking the car, Wang Yuetong led the way without talking to Li Tianlan. She held her head high like a proud little swan. Li Tianlan was too lazy to guess and had no interest in guessing. Following the same route as last time, he went deep into the mysterious club and came to the pavilion where he met Xian Xuanzi last time. Wang Xiaoyao stood outside the pavilion with a gentle and quiet young man. Seeing Li Tianlan coming, no matter what he thought, he at least smiled. Tianlan, we meet again. Since he was a guest, Wang Xiaoyao took the initiative to humble himself, reached out his hand and said with a smile. Hello, Mr. Wang. Li Tianlan looked calm and shook hands with Wang Xiaoyao. A trace of rich and light fragrance went into Wang Xiaoyao's nostrils. Wang Xiaoyao was stunned for a moment, and then his whole face suddenly became stiff. Qin Weibai had a body fragrance that could not be replaced by any perfume. It was completely innate. He had been pursuing Qin Weibai for several years. Although he had never been able to get close to the goddess in his heart, Wang Xiaoyao remembered the rich and natural smell of the goddess clearly. It was even haunting. But now, he could clearly smell the scent that belonged to Qin Weibai on Li Tianlan. At this moment, Wang Xiaoyao's brain was roaring, and his heart seemed to be tightly clenched by a hand. It was so painful that he could hardly breathe. He held Li Tianlan's hand stiffly, and his breath was disordered. He could not say a word of the speech he had prepared. Second uncle. The young man beside Wang Xiaoyao coughed quietly. Wang Xiaoyao suddenly came to his senses and subconsciously let go of Li Tianlan. He forced a smile and looked a little lost. He turned around and looked at the clear pool under his feet. He took a deep breath, and his eyes were unprecedentedly gloomy. The young man looked at Wang Xiaoyao in surprise, and then smiled and reached out to Li Tianlan. Hello, I'm Wang Xingxiao. Thank you for saving my sister. Wang Xingxiao. He ranked first among the top 10 experts of the young generation. He had wind and thunder veins and was known as the young heavenly sun. Li Tianlan's pupils contracted slightly, and he looked seriously at the heir of the Wang family of Beihai in front of him. Now he should be in the thunder-shocking realm, right? Hello. He held Wang Xingxiao's hand and kept his composure. Wang Xingxiao smiled warmly. His face was handsome and tough, and his temperament was modest and gentle. He looked more like a quiet and gentle young scholar, without any sharpness and arrogance of the young heavenly sun. I heard from Yuetong that you have wind and thunder veins. We have the same physique. If you don't mind, I'll leave you my contact information later. How about we compare and learn from each other when we have time? Of course, we should not overdo it, so as not to hurt our friendship. When there's a chance. Li Tianlan's smile was also very sincere, but only he knew what he was thinking in his heart. Do you regret not meeting each other earlier? In recent decades, only 2 people with wind and thunder veins have appeared in the dark world. Now we meet for the first time, and you're so handsome. Senior brother, you're as handsome as my brother. Wang Yuetong giggled, and her smile was cheerful. Wang Xingxiao's handsome face froze slightly. He looked at Li Tianlan, who looked ordinary and delicate at best. He smiled on the surface, but he was smiling bitterly in his heart. It was okay that their physiques were the same. But his silly sister said they were equally handsome. How much of his conscience did he have to say this? He let go of Li Tianlan's hand and touched his face subconsciously. Since you're here, come in. A gentle voice rang out from the pavilion, neither fast nor slow. Li Tianlan's heart skipped a beat, and he looked up subconsciously. In the pavilion, a figure that wasn't very tall and sturdy was throwing fish food into the pond with his back facing them. It was a figure that looked very ordinary, even unremarkable. He scattered the fish food in his hand casually, neither fast nor slow. But in a trance, he was connected with the whole pavilion. All the small bridges and flowing water around him seemed to have become a part of him. Li Tianlan did not move forward, but slightly closed his eyes. Everything in front of him disappeared completely, and his sight was dark. In all of Li Tianlan's perception, there was no pavilion, no flowing water, and even Wang Xiaoyao and others had disappeared. In front of him, there was a vast and abundant momentum like the sky, like the sea. This was the real momentum of invincibility. It filled the world motionlessly, and when it moved, it was earth-shattering. Li Tianlan suddenly opened his eyes and took a deep breath. In a short time, his forehead was already covered with sweat. "You're good." In his sight, the figure in the pavilion had turned around and looked at Li Tianlan with a strange look in his eyes. The wind and thunder veins that have touched the road to invincibility are interesting. Li Tianlan exhaled the turbid air in his chest, subconsciously straightened up, and whispered, "Sword Emperor. Sit." Wang Tianzong waved his hand and pointed to the stone table in the pavilion. Li Tianlan walked over and sat down, looking at Wang Tianzong without saying a word. The man in front of him, whose every move seemed ordinary but was actually like a dragon and a tiger, was likely to be the first person in the dark world in name or in fact. But Li Tianlan's heart was unprecedentedly calm and indifferent. "Your surname is Li?" Wang Tianzong looked at Li Tianlan with great interest. Li Tianlan's heart sank for no reason, but his expression did not change. He just nodded slightly. A young man who clearly wants to be even with the Wang family of Beihai, a young man who is highly valued by the Dongxing clan, a young man who can make Qin Weibai recommend herself to sleep with him, a young man who is highly valued by the academics, a young man who can use the 10th blade of vastness. Wang Tianzong's smile was still gentle. He looked at Li Tianlan, who was still calm in front of him. "It's interesting, isn't it? How do you know?" Even at this time, Li Tianlan's tone was still calm without any fluctuation. "I heard from Yuetong how you saved him. The 24 moves of Sword of Zhuanyuantai of Kunlun is a unique skill that runs through the entire map of God of War. But for hundreds of years, no one can use the 24 moves of sword except for the ancestor of Zhuanyuantai of Kunlun who created the map of God of War. For hundreds of years, the gods of war of Zhuanyuantai of Kunlun either practiced the balance manual or the peak manual. If they didn't practice the strongest invincible manual, the 24 moves of sword would be less elegant. Including the 10th blade, several moves in the 24 moves of sword belong to the domain of the invincible manual. Am I right? Wang Tianzong looked at Li Tianlan, his eyes becoming gentler. Yes. So how do you know? Li Tianlan still said calmly. The 10th blade of Boundless was the domain of the invincible manual. His ancestors couldn't use it at all. It could be said that this sword had never appeared in the world. It was incredible that Wang Tianzong could determine that it was the 10th blade based on Wang Yuedong's oral description. When the ancestor of Zhuanyuantai, who was also the first god of war of Zhongzhou state, created the 24 moves of sword, he integrated a set of punching techniques of your Xianyuan bloodline. At the same time, he also used some unique skills of the Wang family of Beihai for reference. There are some records of the 24 moves of sword in the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Tianzong said lightly. He looked at Li Tianlan and continued, "I learned swordsmanship from Senior Li when I was a child." "How is Senior Li now?" "Thanks to you, I'm doing fine." Li Tianlan's tone was cold. From beginning to end, even when his identity was exposed by Wang Tianzong, he didn't show the slightest panic or shock. "You have a good will. No wonder you dare to come to the Sky Academy." Wang Tianzong said thoughtfully, "You practiced the invincible manual and once entered the fire-flaming realm. So, you were defeated. So you had no choice but to practice again. Who did you lose to?" Li Tianlan didn't say anything. He just looked at Wang Tianzong with cold eyes. It was not hostility, but a kind of alienation and indifference that he subconsciously wanted to keep a distance from. Wang Tianzong looked at him for a while, nodded, and said softly, "Do you have a knot in your heart for the Wang family of Beihai? Because of what happened to your father. I can understand what you did. If I were you, I would do the same. So you don't need to explain. You can explain." The conversation between the two was getting faster and faster, and the atmosphere was getting more and more solemn. "Wang Yuetong, who was beside them, had long been stunned. Senior brother Tianlan, was he the successor of the Li family? No wonder he wanted to be even with her. No wonder. No wonder, she bit her lip tightly. Her mind was in a mess, and she was at a loss for a moment. I'm the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Tianzong took a deep look at Li Tianlan and said slowly. This was his explanation. It was empty, but it explained everything. Li Tianlan seemed to understand, but he also seemed not to understand. He just nodded coldly and said calmly, so I will die here today. At this moment, he suddenly remembered what Great Master Wu Wei had said. He said that he would have a tribulation in the near future, but he did not expect that it would happen here. I won't kill you. Wang Tianzong shook his head. I don't think it was right for the silence of the Wang family of Beihai. But it was wrong to kill you. You won't die. But similarly, I want to give you a suggestion. I'd like to hear the details. Li Tianlan nodded, without any emotional fluctuation. Go back. The Sky Academy is not suitable for you. Wang Tianzong said indifferently. Li Tianlan smiled. He had been calm, as if he would not be angry or afraid, but his momentum suddenly changed, and his eyes began to show a kind of madness and fierceness. Go back. Back to where? Back to the border. It's up to you. You can go back to the border or go abroad. It doesn't make sense for you to come here this time. The Li family no longer exists. Even if you enter the invincible realm, the Li family can't be glorious again. Zhongzhou state is no longer suitable for you. Wang Tianzong did not look at Li Tianlan and said slowly. Li Tianlan's smile became more and more crazy. His eyes seemed to be burning with a strong flame. Everyone could feel the heat and persistence in his eyes. You are the Sword Emperor, the best in the world, but you are not God. You can't control everyone's fate. So, I won't go. I will take back everything the Li family lost, little by little. You can't take anything away. Wang Tianzong's tone turned cold. This is no longer the era of the Li family. The era is created by people. Li Tianlan sneered and said, I want to have a try. You can't stop me. He hammered his chest with all his might. The force was so great that it felt like he was hammering his own soul. Blood gushed out of the corner of his mouth, but in addition to madness, there was only desperate determination in his eyes. I bet on the dignity and honor of the Li family. In the past 20 years, the lives and honor of nearly 1,000 people of the Li family are here, and they are all on me. You can't stop me. No one can stop me. Wang Tianzong turned to look at the pool outside the pavilion and said coldly, then you can have a try. Li Tianlan wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, nodded, and said directly, goodbye. He turned and left the pavilion without looking back. The atmosphere in the pavilion was oppressive and silent. Wang Yuetong, who had been in a daze, finally came to her senses. Looking at Li Tianlan's back, she screamed, Senior brother, and subconsciously rushed in the direction of Li Tianlan's departure. Wang Xingxiao frowned slightly and said in a low voice, Dad. Wang Tianzong shook his head and looked at his daughter who was chasing Li Tianlan. He said expressionlessly, You have the ambition of a wolf. You are not a good match. Thank you for the monthly ticket of Sword in the Zither. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.